shall I fear? He's my guide throughout this creation. So whom shall I be afraid? Jah is my king. Jah is my guide in my resting and my rising. So whom shall I fear? He's my guide when I step out and forward. So whom shall I be afraid? Jah is my king. Jah is my guide when the Philistines come down upon me. So whom shall I fear? He's my guide when my enemies come to devour. So whom shall I be afraid? Jah is my king. Jah is my guide from the pestilence of darkness. So whom shall I fear? He is my guide from the vampire flame. So whom shall I be afraid? Jah is my king. Jah is my king. Jah is my health and my strength. So whom shall I fear? He's a shield upon my right and my left hand. So whom shall I be afraid? Jah is my king.
The Global View on Q, the big station. Insights into where the people of Dominica and the Caribbean came from. Understanding our past. Embracing our present. Charting the way forward into our future. Together, eliminating poverty. Embracing justice, peace, and togetherness. The Global View on Q. Networking Dominica with the rest of the world. The experts are in the house. From Dominica, Canada, the Caribbean, the United States, Europe, Asia, and the rest of the world. Engaging all Dominicans at home and abroad on our agriculture, our economy, our foreign relations, our justice system, our governance, our international competitiveness, our education, our world-class festivals and entertainment, sports, politics, regional cooperation, and much more. Globally positioning Dominica within the Caribbean. Join the conversation on the Global View on Q. Tune in, call us, have your say. The Global View on Q, only on Q95. The big.
Good evening and a very, very warm welcome to you in Radioland. Certainly, we are happy to have you with us tonight. For all of you at home and abroad, this is the Global View on Q. and I'm your host, Sheridan Gregoire, Mr. G. It is Tuesday, the 26th of April, 2022, just about 7:37 in the studios at Q95, the big station. It's the 15th Tuesday of 2022, and tonight my distinguished guests, my very, very distinguished guests are Dr. Irving Andre, who will be joining us very shortly, Attorney Gabriel Christian, opposition leader and leader of the United Workers' Party, Lennox Linton, and former Prime Minister of Dominica, Edison Chenfield James. Delighted, guys, to have you all here with us tonight. And I'm pretty sure that we're going to have a great time tonight, great discussions. Our topic tonight, of course, is going to cover some ground. It's the ongoing but apparently very weak incitement case against members of the opposition. Of course, the punitive bail conditions given to Dr. Thompson Fontaine, and the question of consideration of challenges to these 5-year-old court cases and to the punitive bail conditions, the inhumane conditions of the jail cell that houses people who are presumed to be innocent until proven guilty, the role of agencies like Amnesty International and United Nations Human Rights Commission. What is it? Are they doing anything? Is there something that they can do to fix those inhumane conditions in that jail cell? And are there indications of the possibility of early general elections in Dominica, based on statements by our Prime Minister Skerrit as regards the recommendations that will be made for new electoral and campaign finance laws by Sir Dennis Byron? Will the opposition be ready if he calls a snap election? The Prime Minister stated very clearly that he will go along with whatever recommendations are made by Sir Dennis Byron and will hold general elections based on those recommendations and laws and regulations. But will he do that? Is he bluffing? Will the opposition call his bluff? And will Sir Dennis Byron's report be made available to the public by the Electoral Commission as soon as it is received from Sir Dennis Byron? And of course, as we go along, maybe we might talk a little bit about Dominic and geothermal, the elusive geothermal energy project. So stay tuned tonight. It's Q95, the big station. And as I said, my distinguished guest tonight, Dr. Irving Andre, Attorney Gabriel Christian, opposition leader, and leader Lennox Linton, former Prime Minister Edison James. We'll discuss the good as usual. We discuss the good, the bad, the ugly, and the dangerous. If inputs from you, our callers and supporters and listeners, relatives and friends at home and abroad. And as we always say, we do so with no anger, no malice, no personal attacks, no vilification, no divisiveness, just looking to bring back civility, a caring society, good governance, peace and love among our Kalinago and Afro-Caribbean brothers and sisters and friends of Dominica at home and abroad. So wherever you are in Dominica, in the region and globally, please join this conversation on the Global View on Q and call in and have your say as you do every Tuesday with me, Mr. G, only on the Q95, the big station. So we're live. We're live on YouTube and we're live on Facebook at Q95 FM Radio. Please share the live. We salute you on all of the online streaming platforms. Please invite your friends to join the Q family and get the latest breaking local, regional, and international happenings. Tonight, of course, the voices of the Dominican listeners, your voices at home and abroad, will be given priority on what you see as a solution to fix some of these issues and challenges and concerns facing you and Dominica, as we have been describing in my talking points. But Lambi will take your calls and direct them to us. Many people say that Dominica is facing a crisis of governance, so I continue to suggest that the best way to start fixing any such crisis in the current circumstances and environment is to unify Dominicans at home and abroad around a government of national unity, so that we can use the skills, the talents of every single Dominican everywhere at home and abroad, so that we can all focus on working together to allow all ideas to contend and to act with one voice, with one mission, to establish a robust economy, where the private sector and not the government will once again be the true engine of development. We will focus on export-led investments, productivity and growth, meaningful employment and wealth generation for all Dominicans. And we would do so obviously based on our agriculture, our agribusiness, including medicinal cannabis oils extracts, renewable energy and manufacturing, art and cultural industries, water and water-based industries, among others, as major economic pillars. So tonight, I repeat that in my opinion, Dominica does not have a chance of changing direction and fixing its economic woes in any meaningful way in the short to medium term within the current environment of victimization, of divisiveness and hostility, intolerance of alternative views and ideas, and especially without the inputs and expertise of all Dominicans at home and abroad, educated or uneducated, some of whom are still being marginalized. And as I've been doing for some weeks now, I call again on the current DLP government to drop all of these frivolous charges that have been brought against members of the opposition and Dr. Thompson Fontaine and other patriots, and allow them to use their full potentialities to help restore Dominica's economy and establish stability. We shout out Dr. Thompson Fontaine. We will play one of his voice inserts in an interview he had with Matt just when we just get ready to begin our program, and just a little bit later on, minutes from now. But as I said, we are, as I've said before, we are witnessing the evolution of contemporary people's organizations and people's movements, like the Nature Island Dominica Civil Liberties Foundation, NITCLIF, to continue to fight for freedom, health, and well-being of every Dominican. We ask you to go to the NITCLIF website at www.nidclf.org and make a donation to assist the search for the unaccounted billions, to help the people of Salisbury get some redress for the tear gas and gunshots leveled at them by armed forces while they slept, and to help provide legal defense for people like Dr. Thompson Fontaine and all those persons who are charged with incitement. So we can do this, provide this support for the long haul all the way up to the CCJ if it becomes necessary. Huge shout out, hugs, much love and appreciation. A big thank you to our healthcare providers and frontline workers doing their best to keep us safe from the deadly coronavirus and its new variants. Often they're working under very difficult conditions, as we always say. We acknowledge that. So please follow the correct advice, guidelines, and protocols. Play it safe, stay alive. So happy to have you with us. Welcome on board, wherever you are in every nook and cranny in the community in Dominica. We want to hail up people of Montjour and Rivière Syrique, Fuyal. With Dr. Thompson Fontaine, I know that they're embracing and uplifting him tonight. He feels at home again, no longer on a concrete floor with rats and roaches. We'll be talking a little bit more about rats and roaches a little later in the program. But thank you to our engineer Sheridan Norris, who is keeping us on the air, and Lambert Lambie Charles. Ozzy Lewis calls him the indefatigable Lambert Charles, who is on the console at Q95, directing the traffic as usual. I'm sure Lambie will take your calls and direct them to us in the show as we go along. So as we said, we're going to make the people's voice tonight a priority. So let's get started. I want to go over to Dr. Irving Andre. Not because he's the youngest and the best looking, but just because of who he is. And I just want to remind him that we're trying to talk about a few things here. The weak incitement case against members of the opposition, the punitive bail conditions given to Dr. Thompson Fontaine, consideration of challenges to these 5-year-old court cases, and to the punitive bail conditions, the inhumane conditions of the jail cell that house people who are presumed to be innocent until proved guilty, the role of agencies like Amnesty International and the HRC, the United Nations Human Rights Commission. So we touched on some of those points, and we did speak about the possibility of early general elections. So Dr. Andre, I know that you've been very busy. You're a real true patriot. Thank you for being here tonight, and I yield to you now. Your mic, you might want to open your mic.
All right, thank you. I hope you can hear me now. Let me
Very well.
say good evening to my fellow esteemed panelists who are all padded up and ready to go. And the Lambi, the showing, to your dedicated and devoted listeners, I say thank you. And let me repeat this biblical admonition that irrespective of how things look dark, this is the day that the Lord has made. We obviously are dealing with yet another crisis, yet another exhibit that all is not well in the state of Denmark. We're looking at another situation which again reminds us, as if we need any reminding, that quite frankly, there seems to be two systems of justice in Dominica. One where certain persons are singled out and they face the full wrath of the law, and others where people can just waltz in and out of wrongdoing without so much as a whimper of protest from the authorities. Let me just remind you as to what we're dealing with here. Obviously, Mr. Linton, Mr. James, Miss Dr. Fontaine were charged on or about sometime after that incident in February of 2017 with incitement. Bear in mind that those charges arose after a legitimate demonstration in the vicinity of the financial center. And bear in mind that at the behest of the police, certain of the leaders like Lennox, Linton attended the scene and helped to disperse the crowd. And bear in mind that one time later that evening that Dr. Fontaine was on Q95, he was heard by hundreds, if not thousands. And that is significant because it was during the evening that there was some type of resort to stone throwing and so on. There's absolutely no eyewitness accounts indicating that any of those persons who were charged with incitement were involved in that activity. And I'm reliably informed that there is no witness who's identified any one of them as instigating what transpired 4 to 5 hours after what was a legitimate expression of opinion by a certain part of the electorate. Henceforth, they were charged. Suffice it to say that this case has languished in the court system for over 5 years, despite the fact that a high-priced criminal lawyer from Trinidad, who quite frankly probably gleefully rubs his hands at the copious or at this enormous amounts of money that he's receiving from taxpayers for doing nothing. But that is the backdrop of this case. A bench warrant was issued for Thompson, as far as I understand, in 2018 because he didn't appear at his court date. But the whole of Dominica knows where he was. He was in the Sudan on official duties appointed by the British government. And that is why he did not attend. Suffice it to say, based on what I heard from Thompson himself, before coming to Dominica, he, through his counsel, advised the authorities that he is coming to deal with this matter. He indicated to them through counsel, as I understand it, that that is what's going to happen. He arrived in Dominica on Saturday, whereupon a contingent, my understanding is 3 loads of 14 to 15 officers were waiting for him. And suffice it to say that they took him to the Rosa Center. And they thought that the situation was of such importance that it was necessary to keep him in custody for the whole weekend, despite the fact that the magistrate attended, and that was not exceptional, at the police station to facilitate the hearing to determine whether or not he should be released. Suffice it to say that the police, despite the fact that this case has been in the system for 5 years, they requested more preparation time. But they've had the case for 5 years and they still wanted time to prepare, for God's sakes. In any event, through that type of chicanery, Dr. Thompson Fontaine was forced to spend the weekend in custody in less than ideal surroundings. The police couldn't even get a coconut fiber mattress for him, but perhaps if there was a magistrate around and he could change his name to Chucksy, probably they would have gotten one for him that evening. So they certainly exposed him to the most draconian circumstances they could possibly, because again, as you've indicated, there was a punitive aspect to this whole sordid business. He was brought before a magistrate, lay magistrate, former police officer, and he was released on a number of conditions. Here's my understanding as to the 5 conditions. $75,000 bail amount. He is to attend the court on April 29th for a so-called means test to assess whether or not he has the economic wherewithal for that quantum of bail. Third, he is to apply to the court 72 hours before traveling, for God's sakes, to get permission to do so. Fourth, he is to report to the Maho police station Mondays and Fridays between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. I don't quite understand why Maho. Perhaps that is because the arresting officer, as I understand it, is from Maho, but I don't know. I don't think, or I don't know that Thompson lives in Maho, because typically, if there's any reporting condition, you report to the nearest police station nearest to your home or your residence. And the 5th condition is to refrain from speaking to the media about this case. And the question has to be, what would warrant and justify these conditions? Given A, the circumstances or the nature of the allegations, and B, the personal circumstances of the person who's been released. There's an overarching principle that everyone is entitled to reasonable bail. What is reasonable is reflected in the conditions of release. The conditions of the release are tailored, one, to the nature of the allegations, and secondly, the personal circumstances of the person being released. Now, let me repeat this. Thompson, based on what I've been told, came back to Dominica on his own volition. But not only that, he didn't come like a thief in the night. He didn't come on some boat from Guadeloupe or Martinique, as so many hundreds of Dominicans did when they came to vote illegally. And yet the police did nothing. On the contrary, the police, in some instances, the police facilitated that illegal activity. He announced his arrival through his counsel, and that would explain why he had a welcoming party at the airport. So clearly, that in itself proclaims that here is a man who poses no risk of fleeing the jurisdiction or of absconding, because he returned voluntarily. He announced his arrival. So you cannot justify these kinds of conditions applying to court 72 hours before traveling to get permission. You can't justify the whole question of having to report twice weekly at the Maho. And again, as I said, pardon my ignorance, I'm not sure why Maho police station. The only reason I can think of is either Thompson lives in Maho or the arresting officer is from Maho, as has been reported over the radio. Typically, the reporting condition is at a police station which is closest to where you reside. And the whole question of a $75,000 bail. He has to show that there are enough assets, either pledged either by himself or others, to satisfy that bail if in fact he absconds. Now, obviously, if he intended to abscond, he wouldn't have come back at all voluntarily. He wouldn't come back at all. It is not as if someone picked him up in the Sudan and brought him back against his will. Again, the point has to be made that the point has to be made that he came back voluntarily. Now, I'm being advised that Thompson lives in Jimmet, and hence the closest station is Maho. Well, that certainly explains it, but it doesn't explain why, in the circumstances I have outlined, he has to report twice weekly because through his actions, through his motions, his decision to return, he has clearly indicated an intention to come back to deal with these issues. What is also troubling is that, from my information, is that during the hearing, the magistrate had to take 2 different recesses, perhaps a health break, I don't know, or perhaps to get further instructions, I don't know. But again, the circumstances of the Thompson Fontaine, in terms of what transpired, does not justify these stringent conditions. What about the case itself? What about the case itself? What about the paucity of evidence with respect to any type of incitement? 5 years and it still hasn't been set down for a trial. 5. Gabriel Christian will tell you about a law in the States called the Hicks Law, where a case must be set down for trial, or there must be a trial within 6 months of the charges being laid. 6 months. It could be adjourned in exceptional circumstances. In my jurisdiction, the case has to be brought before the Superior Court in 30 months, and in the lower court in 18 months, absent exceptional circumstances. So that this case has a long history, and the significant part of this delay is that, again, I stand to be corrected. In fact, I'm being told that there were 5 recesses during the bail hearing. Somebody must have been given out free black pudding during that bail hearing, but I'm not going to speculate. Right? 5 years. And what is significant is that those delays were occasioned at the request, and I stand to be corrected, primarily at the request of the prosecution. So this is what we call institutional delay. In this jurisdiction, we would have dumped this case twice over. We would have dumped it once, then bring it back and dump it again. Because the prosecution does not have the luxury of holding a criminal charge against a citizen of any state who is clothed in the presumption of innocence for such a long period. I'm also advised that all the persons were charged with the lesser offense of obstructing, and these charges were adjourned sine die. That itself is an abuse, because certainly in our jurisdiction, there are a number of cases which say that, look, you cannot hold a criminal charge over someone's head for an indefinite period, because there's an exquisite agony associated with a criminal case. You can adjourn a civil matter sine die, because the personal liberty of that person or reputation of that person is not engaged. But you cannot hold a criminal matter over someone's head indefinitely, in limbo. You can't do it. But it's a bad movie which we're experiencing right now, isn't it? It's a bad movie. No, every citizen is presumed innocent of any type of allegation. But as long as you keep them under that pressure, that crisis, you keep them with that stress of having this criminal offense hanging over their heads, you are in effect depriving them of some of their rights to be presumed innocent and to live free as citizens in their own land. I'm surprised that this business of adjourning a criminal charge, sine die for God's sakes, hasn't been challenged. I don't know if it's been challenged. At least I haven't heard it's been challenged. I don't know if it's been challenged in other West Indian jurisdictions. I don't know if that is even done in other West Indian jurisdictions. But again, that is a very sad state of affairs, because you can see the abuse, the potential for abuse. Those you don't like, those you describe as the wretched of the earth, those you think who should need political re-education, you are basically inducing them to come begging or lying prostrate at your feet, begging forgiveness. So that stigma can be removed from you. And that is patently wrong. This case exemplifies everything that is wrong with what happens in a system where you don't have the rule of law applied equally to everyone, irrespective of their political views or political affiliation or political allegiance. Every citizen should have the same rights under the law. Some should not be ostracized and criminalized and persecuted and treated as if somehow they're lesser than anybody else. They should not have to be forced to sell away their values, sell away their principles, come groveling on bended knee, saying, Gasso, I love you so much now, despite what I may have said before. They should not be clothing themselves with fabric woven from 30 pieces of silver. They should be given the liberty of standing tall and proud based on their principle. So this case again raises not just red flags, serious concerns about what we're dealing with in this case. Wasn't there someone is there anybody around here, any of your panelists lives in Mount Daniel, for God's sakes, who probably could tell us about someone from Iran called Mount Fared, who used to have a perpetual party in Dominica? Oh, sorry, somebody's raising his hand. I can't see who that is. But anyway, someone who enjoyed himself so much that he left bills by business people selling chicken and all that stuff and so on. A fugitive from justice in Dominica for over 8 months. Where were police? And were there not 2 English fellows who were transported as VIP persons to a home in Mont Daniel? For God's sakes, they were caught on video. And they left Dominica surreptitiously after acting as agents, provocateurs, seeking to cause no good. Were any warrants issued for the arrest? Did any police officers go and try to arrest them? No. These are serious concerns which go to the very heart of our system of justice in Dominica. And we should point that out, because quite frankly, you never know where the next jackboot, which door it's going to break down. And that is why we must be concerned. Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Andre. I mean, already we've only had some brief remarks from just one of our attorneys, but it seems to me he's already laid the foundation and made the case for that a serious challenge can be mounted on this case is there and on this whole question of the punitive bail conditions. And I think that our committee of concerned lawyers can give themselves a little bit of work to do here. Certainly any lawyers out there can do that, but I think we will talk to them and find out whether in fact they can mount a challenge on this, because it seems to me that the case is clear. Let me just go over to Attorney Gabriel Christian. Before I go over to Mr. Lennox, Linton, and former Prime Minister Edison James, who are in fact persons who have been charged of incitement, they will give us a lot of information about that. We'll also hear from Dr. Thompson Fontaine, who also is charged of incitement. So let me go over to you, Brother Gabriel Christian.
Good evening, Brother G.
Yeah.
Good evening, Mr. Prime Minister. Good evening, Brother Lennox, Leader of the Parliamentary Opposition, Brother Lambie, Master Control, my dear brother Irving. Before we came on this evening, I asked the former Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition whether they also had been charged in this case or in matters similar relating to the demonstration of February of 2017, which I'm reliably informed by way of chronology, puts us at about 5 years. And they said they had, but in both instances, the cases had been adjourned to sine die. Well, sine die has a definition. I want to have our listening audience, because we're about education, we're not about fooling the masses. It says a court may adjourn, and I quote, a case sine die. An adjournment sine die means that the matter is being stayed until the court provides the parties with further notice, which can be done for a variety of reasons. For example, sine die might be used in a case that was initiated incorrectly. Sine die might be used in instances where a case was initiated incorrectly, so as to give the party another chance to start the action over again. Dominicans, are you listening? So here we have, I'm reliably informed, a gold-plated $1 million Trinidadian lawyer being paid at the expense of the taxpayers of Dominica to persecute, not prosecute, to persecute Dominicans like Edison James and to destroy them, to persecute people like Lennox Linton, a Dominican, and to destroy them, and to persecute Thompson Fontaine, our beloved brother, and to destroy him. While, as Dr. Andre said, Dominica, which is an affiliate of Interpol, its high officials and government harbored a known international spy and fugitive here in Dominica, and a born Dominican who has done all his life things that can bring to us and have brought to us outstanding accolade in way of reputational characteristics, and his performance in economic development advising across the globe is locked down in a roach-infested cell. His passport is taken, or is asked to be taken, and he's made to report to Maho for whatever reason I do not know, twice a week. And this government, which has destroyed our judiciary, bringing it into disrepute because of the manner in which it has been manhandled and mishandled. This government, which has abused our police service, using it as a bludgeoning tool, a cudgel with which to bit democracy activists and the legitimate law-abiding opposition of the Commonwealth of Dominica, imposes those burdensome and wicked requirements on our brother with no useful purpose. Why do I say this? Why do I say this? Judge Andre talked about the Hicks rule. That is correct. From the charging of a person here in Maryland to 180 days out, the case must be tried. In recent years, we've had, the past 2 years in particular, extensions, a degree of elasticity because of the global coronavirus pandemic. Other than that, I have had the occasion to walk into court and the state is not ready. Your witnesses are not available. I said, you're on a motion to dismiss, motion granted. In fact, when my cases are dismissed, I normally make an oral motion for speedy trial. They say, case dismissed. I say, Your Honor, please note the docket for defendant's speedy trial request. Just in the event they try to refile in some way to sort of elongate or prolong that 180 days. This afternoon, before I came here for this meeting, I filed a particular case in Queen Anne County for a waiver of Hicks because I will not have the toxicology report before our motion to suppress hearing. So I'm asking the court to accept that I'm waiving my client's right, and she has to sign that affirmatively, to a speedy trial because we on our side aren't equipped with the forensic evidence review that we need. In Dominica, we have a plethora of bogus charges. They said Sam Christian incited the burn parliament. It's a bogus charge. Lennox Linton, Edison James, Joseph Isaac, I might add, all charged. What happened to Joseph Isaac's case? Joseph Isaac is sitting in parliament, giving Lennox Linton, Daniel Ogay, and Spags a hard time. Doesn't allow them to speak, allows guns in the parliament. This is the situation we're dealing with here. We are seeing a duality in the application of justice. But justice delayed is justice denied. And so I'm advising the Prime Minister, the one who is very fond of offering the olive branch. Lennox, you know what that is? an olive branch which conceals a deceitful dagger directed at the heart of Dominicans. When you say out of one side of your mouth that you seek reconciliation and you seek to offer olive branches to people, and on the other side, you refuse electoral reform, on the other side, you brutalize your citizens, on the other side, you levy bogus charges, on the other side, you adjourn matters sine die because you may have in fact proceeded incorrectly, but you want to keep the sword of Damocles dangling over the heads of the opposition so you can jerk them around as easily as you want. Well, it's not going to work. It's not going to work because we're going to keep on exposing this government and its corrupt activities, its destruction of our civil service, its destruction of our police service, its destruction of our law courts, and its destruction of the social peace that once held us together in some sense of community, of civility, where now the vocabulary is that of genocide. Garbage is what we're called, cockroaches is what we're called, you see. And so that the young Dominicans who are yet to arise to their duties, I call on you tomorrow, Wednesday, all Dominicans who are fit and able to join the walk for freedom, to give thanksgiving to the Almighty for having steeled us over the weekend to demand the release of our brother Thompson Fontaine, to protect him, protect the parliamentary opposition, protect the democracy activists, dismiss the cases against Mr. James, Brother Lennox, Brother Thompson, Brother Sam, and all those unjustly persecuted, because we intend for justice to roll like a mighty flood and wash away the sins that have stained our land. Thank you.
And thanks a lot for that, Gabriel. I know that you have a lot more to say, but I can see already we're making the case, right? And that is the point I was making from the beginning, making a case where this 5-year-old thing seems to be weak, and really the charges appear to be frivolous. And I think the government would be well advised to drop those charges. Yeah, I think really they will be challenged, because it seems to me that how can they stand after 5 years? You listen to Dr. Andrew say in his jurisdiction it's 30 months. You listen to Gabriel in his jurisdiction, it's just 6 months. This thing is going on for 5 years. Now, I want to go over to the actual people now who are being persecuted in this thing. But I want to just first go over to Lambi to just play, first of all, a little voice insert, a little thing of Dr. Fontaine, because he's not with us here tonight. And when he does that, I will also ask him, because you see, Dr. Fontaine will talk to us about the conditions in the jail cell where he was. And you know, he mentioned in that interview, I think, roaches and rats and things like that. And then what I found to be very unfair, which is, I think, is the point that Dr. Irving Andrew was making. When you say that you put bail conditions on the man, which is a gag order, he cannot speak to the media about anything. But then I listened in news today, and another attorney was speaking about the case and blasting Thompson Fontaine. Does it mean that Thompson Fontaine has no recourse? He cannot go and answer the other thing. So let me just go over to Lambi. Let him run the little little interview that Matt did with Thompson. And then after that, I want to run the voice of this attorney who is criticizing Dr. Thompson Fontaine. And then for us to understand a lot more about what Dr. Irving Andre and Attorney Gabriel Christian talking about roaches and so on, and rats and something called kakadors. Maybe we'll hear some of that coming out of those voice inserts. And then I will ask former Prime Minister Edison James to come in and give us his side of the story on this case, and then opposition leader Lennox Linton. So Lambi, you can run a couple of these inserts for us.
I thought about it because it made me reflect quite a bit on how it is, how we treat our people, you know. I mean, even if somebody is accused of doing a crime, the fact that you end up in a particular cell, you're just accused. You've not been charged. You've not been, in some cases, not been charged. You've not been found guilty before a court of law, and yet you're put for a kind of a punishment. I mean, I can tell you, We were being served bread and butter. It was great. I can tell you, the first day I had the bread and butter and Kool-Aid, it was nice because it's been a long time I've had the bread and butter for breakfast. But I found out soon after that I was going to my lunch and my dinner, the same bread and butter and Kool-Aid. And interestingly, there was a gentleman there who was just out of his mind, really. He just kept, throughout the night, he was screaming, he was talking to himself very loudly, and so on. And it was kind of funny because, well, not funny, but it also, I'm saying it because it's an interesting story in the sense that there was this young gentleman there who was brought up, who was in the cells, as he told me, and as I was told by the other inmates who were in the cell, that he was there because he had stolen 6 bread. He had stolen 6 bread, and he was being locked up. And then here he was being fed bread and butter. So I think on Sunday, after about 5 days, I think on Sunday he got tired of the bread and butter. So he kept telling the officer, you're not seeing the Vienna sausage? Look, the Vienna sausage there, officer. It's right there, officer, you're not seeing it, it's right there. Take this Vienna sausage for me. He kept talking about Vienna sausage. He wanted Vienna sausage. And way into the morning, at 3 in the morning, I'm calling out to somebody, bring me 2 Vienna sausages, so it showed in a way that there was this man who was clearly mentally unstable, put under those conditions. And I really felt sorry because I was thinking that we can do better. Matter a society, the reflection of a society is how you take care of the most vulnerable about you. Let me see how you treat the poor, the underprivileged. Let me see how you treat them, and I can tell you what kind of country you are. And I think we can do a lot better in terms of how we take care of our people. I heard stories while in the cell about, the conditions what people are going through the legal system, no representation. I saw, for example, a young man being brought in there and being manhandled, by the police, a teenager. So all of those things I think we have to talk about. One of the things that I'm going to really make very prominent as part of my campaign here in Dominica is police and judicial reform. I think that's very important going forward to build a stronger, better country, that there needs to be some reform within our judicial system, the way we take care of people when they enter at the very lowest level, those who do not have the means to get a lawyer, those who do not have the means to negotiate their way out of situations, how we take care of them, how we deal with them, the process that they have to go through. I think these are some of the things that really opened my eyes.
Dr. Fontaine was arrested upon his return to Dominica over the weekend following a bench warrant issued for his arrest. The warrant stems from Fontaine's absence for 2 court appearances in 2018 after obstruction charges were brought against him. Audios have surfaced where Fontaine explained his reasoning for snubbing the courts in 2018, saying he believes the case was a political ploy which would hinder his work in South Sudan.
It's a frontal attack on the integrity of the judicial process. It's a fundamental attack on the administration of justice by suggesting that your failure to attend and the failure of your lawyer to advance a good reason for your absence, other than I can't account to it, constituted political interference is insane and asinine and dishonest. Dishonesty that affects the public interest, because it's just shocking that we can hear a man say, I'm not coming because that's politics. Maybe the DPP should consider preferring a charge against him for bringing the magistrate's court into disrepute.
As the fan speculates, Dr. Fontaine's return is also a strategic ploy to eventually take a leadership role in the UWP.
Fontaine knew he had this warrant of arrest. There was no application to the High Court to have it set aside. There was no application to the magistrate to have it set aside. To this day, no rational reason except work in Sudan has been advanced or from which you can infer a reason why he didn't turn up. So why did he turn up this time? And I'm beginning to believe that this was a strategic plan to bring him in at this time. It could be he lost his job in Sudan. It could be his contract may not be renewed. So let me put that on the table. So he's coming back now to look for another gravy train to jump on. But I am hearing through the Blue Ribbon rumor mill that Fontaine has returned at this time with the knowledge of certain executive members of the UWP, that Fontaine has come back to challenge Lennox Linton for the United States.
And that was senior
I rather have a reputation for vulgarity in the eyes of the people, and I make no apology for describing some of them fellas the way that I have described them in the past. So when I say Edison, say cockroach, Edison. When I say Tim Tim, you say Kakado, Tim Tim. And when I say crazy, say mosquito. Part of our population are like hungry pigs waiting at the trough. There's some people who actually behave like pigs. These people were at the pig trough and they were lapping it up. When I take out the belt and I drop it in your backside, Lennox, open your ears or your backside, whichever one you know best with. And I said, enough disrespect, enough. I went on the radio and I put a pyrash in his backside, you heard me? But I know one thing about Lyo. The Irishman peanut bone drop a lawsuit in his backside. Well, Lennox, I hope you're taping this because Lester Bud tell me to drop a lawsuit in your backside too, and he coming.
He's an economic terrorist. He's absolutely disqualified to represent any single human being in this land. He's disqualified from representing any life form, whether in form of a horse, a donkey, or a dog, in any scenario and in any place.
You who will put your head in the sand and stick your posterior outside for labor man to put their shoe up your backside. No, I'm not no senior counsel tonight, comrade. I talking as a man who believes in the Labour Party. No senior counsel. I'm not talking to you as a lawyer. I see no judge. But I have a judgment from the English court about him. And I will let you put it in his backside, Kupum. Let him open his ugly mouth one more time. Then you have Blackmore. He gonna put some saber tooth in Julian Prevost backside. He gonna rip out the pants. No apology, boss. And if you call that vulgarity, I'll wear it as a badge of honor on my chest.
So there we are. There we are. We've heard from Thompson Fontaine. We have heard from an attorney who is out there obviously criticizing Thompson Fontaine. The court has placed an embargo, a gag order on Thompson Fontaine. He's not supposed to defend himself. And then, of course, we hear the quality of the speech of that particular attorney, the way he's speaking about Thompson Fontaine, the way he's speaking about Lennox, Linton, and Edison James, the way he's speaking about people generally. And then when you think about Thompson Fontaine talking about cockroaches and rats and so on in that cell, and hear somebody saying you have to use a shoe and step on them and crush them and all those kind of things, you wonder, what is this all about? So I want to go over to Prime Minister Edison James, because you're one of the people who has been in charge of incitement. And obviously you're one of the people who has been told, you know, you're going to be crushed like a cockroach. So please, would you tell us your side of the story on this? Now you can open your mic.
Yes. Can you hear me, Sheridan?
Oh, hearing you very, very clearly, loud and clear.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Good to be with you, Sheridan, and good to be with the other colleagues and with Lambie and with Sherwin. This exercise is not really for us, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of us in this environment. This exercise tonight is for the people of Dominica, primarily, mainly, for them to hear, understand, and digest what we are dealing with. To hear, you heard the vitriol, you heard the gut-rending racism coming from this man, Tony Estefan. Gentlemen and listeners, this is at the heart of our problem, you know. This Tony Estefan. They talk about incitement, and Lennox and I and Thompson and others are before the court for incitement. You heard Estefan ask the people to respond when he says cockroach. And Edison James, when I say Edison James, say cockroach, and you heard them. And you heard what he said about Julius and crazy. But the next line after that was when he said to them, when you see a cockroach, what do you take to kill it? There can be no other interpretation to that. That Tony Astafan in the valley in 2005, I think it was telling people, inciting people to kill Edison James, that cockroach. There's no other interpretation. And Tony Astafan had in his mind what happened in Rwanda with the Hutsis and the Tutsis, where the Hutsis decided that they were going to describe the Tutsis as cockroaches and use that as a rallying call for the Hutsis to kill the Tutsis. He's an intelligent man. He knows what he was doing. So Dominicans, I'm urging you, you don't have to like Edison James and Lennox, Linton and Thomas Fontaine and the other people, but you like yourself. I'm a black man, like Lennox is a black man, Thompson is a black man. I find it really unintolerable for this Arab to be coming to you and telling you that you must hate your brothers, and you must, because he never says these things about Michael Astafan, who was the leader of the Freedom Party. So it cannot be just confined to his politics. No, that guy has a deep-seated racist bone right through him. You talk about incite. If that is not incitement, I want to know what is incitement. And let me see that with respect to this thing with Thomas Fontaine and the way they've treated Thomas Fontaine, I think all of us agree that if there's a warrant for arrest, then the police will discharge their duties and they will do what they have to do. But what is the demonstrable reason and reason that for the way they treated Thomas Fontaine? It was clearly to humiliate him, to punish him, and to do all kind of things, and to bring him down to the status that Astafan described. He's a pig, he's an animal, he's a cockroach, he's a kakadu. And remember, it's on record that Tony Astafan, we have been told, speaks 95% of the time for the Prime Minister of this country. We've never heard the Prime Minister of this country distance himself from that kind of thing. And Sheridan, you are in charge of a radio station, and I'm suggesting to you that we need to bring this kind of situation to the attention of the public and to the attention of those people who have the ears of Skerrit, okay, or who listen to Skerrit, to say to him that this thing will cause problems in this country because people are not going to continue to take this nonsense. When Lennox and I were supposed to have gone to the court on one occasion, and we had been there several times, and the case was being heard in the afternoon. On that particular occasion, for some reason, the case was scheduled for the morning, and so we did not know. We were preparing for the afternoon. It seems that at some stage when we were not there, they suggested that there was going to be a bench warrant. The people of Marigot heard that there was a bench warrant and I had been arrested, and they reacted in a particular way. This thing that is Tony Astafan is going on with, I'm warning. I'm putting my former Prime Minister hat on my head. I'm putting my elder statesman hat on my head. And I'm warning the religious leaders, the public service leaders, the business leaders to pay attention and take some action, because this will cause a problem in the country. It will cause a problem with this country. No. So you have Anthony Astafan being able to come in the air and to say all these things about Thomas Fontaine with respect to this very matter that the magistrate has put a gag order on him on. So that one thing, and the two lawyers are there. I'm not a lawyer, but I spent 25 years as a lawmaker. So, gentlemen, give me a little leeway. I'm not going to do the technical things, but I think the practical. So, is his constitutional rights being preserved when you tell him that he cannot speak on an issue which you cannot show is going to have any negative impact by him talking about the case, the incitement case and the obstruction case, by him talking about it, especially responding to what has been thrown at him by this man here, Tony Astafan, and you telling me that it's right for you to gag him so he cannot defend himself? So the minds of potential jurors are contaminated by the filth of this Tony Astafan guy, and he cannot defend himself and put his side in the ears of the very people who Tony Astafan is contaminating. Is that reasonable? Okay. And when you look at how the Thompson came in, he brought himself in, as all of you have said. He wasn't hiding. Is it reasonable for them not to have been able to deal with that case on Saturday afternoon with a magistrate present? I am told by people who know that this is a normal thing, and when the magistrate, the court, the representative of the court, which imposed the warrant, the arrest warrant, a magistrate is there, willing and ready and able to discharge or to hear the case, that you, the authorities, seem to have done all kind of dancing and mazouk to make sure that the matter was not heard, so he could go in the cell. Clearly, to any objective thinking person, the conclusion is that it was deliberately done to ensure that Thompson Fountain spent as much time in the cell as possible. And you talk about incitement, gentlemen. This case is being dealt with by paper committal, I've been told, and if I'm wrong on any technical aspects, the lawyers will correct me. It's being done by paper committal. I've seen the document with the evidence that is supposed to have been coming from the people who are the witnesses. There is not one, Mr. Andre, Gabriel, there's not one comment by any one of those 70-something witnesses that says that Lennox, Linton, Thompson Fountain, Edison, James, or anybody else said anything to urge people to do anything by way of committing an offense. Not one. Not one. So there's absolutely no case that they have there. No case at all. But yet they're continuing to use this thing as a sword of Damocles over the heads of people, including myself, so that for how many years I'm in limbo as to what I do. Now I've seen the magistrate has imposed sanctions or restrictions on Thompson Fountain. Are they going to impose restrictions on the others as well? In just now, when they get the directions from whoever give them directions? And to the extent that they're talking about incitement, and the police and the DPP or whoever are hot on this incitement thing, and they want to prevent incitement. Well, Mr. Skerritt said at Bellevue Shop or someplace, he urged the people he was talking to, when the opposition people come to your home to campaign, throw hot water on them. That is an offense. To throw hot water on people as an offense. So you are inciting people to commit a crime. My understanding is that incitement has to be, for it to be a crime, it has to be that you incite, you tell people to do something which is a crime. It is Mr. Skerritt who told people to throw hot water on us. Did the Commissioner of Police hear that? Did the DPP hear that? It is Mr. Skerritt who said to the public, when you see the opposition people, anywhere you see them, go up to their face and call them traitors. If I'm a traitor to my country. The penalty is either death or life imprisonment. So you've incited them to come to me. And in fact, one guy in Marigot, after Skerritt urged them to do that, on 2 occasions, he came up to me and called me traitor on the urging of Skerritt. I reported the matter to the police in Marigot twice. They did what they had to do. Then you have Reggie Ostry urging people to kidnap Lennox Linton, take him away. Is that incitement, Mr. Commissioner? But I do not expect the commissioner to do anything, because when Lennox Lawrence said in Lago, urged people to kill Spags John and to kill Ron Green and to kill Edison James, because he told them, he's urged that they should treat us the same way Obama has treated Al-Qaeda. And we know what Obama did, what was supposed to have been doing to Al-Qaeda is to kill them. Spags John and I went to the police commissioner and reported to him this matter. I've never heard from the commissioner. But the commissioner probably thinks of the United Workers' Party as troublemakers, because there was a meeting with the commissioner involving some of our members of our leadership, our party's leadership, and the commissioner indicated them, it's been reported to me, that we are troublemakers. And that leader, that prominent person in our party, formed the opinion that the commissioner thought we were terrorists. It's the commissioner who said in public about the extent to which the police can use deadly force. So we have seen all those things. And whereas the Constitution says that all of us in Dominica are supposed to receive equal treatment under the law, the opposition people, identified opposition people, cannot and are not receiving treatment under the law. Incitement. We are all Dominicans. How then it is that all of us are Dominicans, but within the last several months, Lennox Linton has been picked up by the police. I'm going to name the names of some of the names of the people. Nicholas George, Loftus Duran, Thompson Fontaine, Claudia Sanford, Joshua Francis, Brian Linton, 3 people of the Monsewe group, a chap called Poro George in Marigot, Seth Gussie in Marigot, Johnson Boston, Haki, he's the Calypsonian, Danny Luge, Joseph Isaac, Edison James, all these people. Why it is that it's only we in opposition who know how to incite? Okay? And then you have the situation where Hector John made a comment some time ago that if there is no electoral reform, there will be civil disobedience. I'm advised that civil disobedience is not an offense. But Hector John was arrested for making that comment. The matter went to the court. And you know, the magistrate who was supposed to be dealing with that matter left where the magistrate was and made the comment, I'm going down there to deal with that nuisance, Hector John. That is what we get. So how can we not conclude that we cannot get fair treatment, equal treatment under the law? So I'm just saying, what is this about? I have a newspaper here, the Barbados Advocate of today's date, and it's speaking about the elections, recent a situation which developed in Nicaragua recently. And in that piece, there's this section. Ortega, who is the president of Nicaragua, was elected to a 4th consecutive term on November 7th elections that were broadly criticized as a farce. Here is one. 7 likely challengers to Ortega had been arrested and jailed in the months prior to the election. I know of those Alba people, Ortega is one of the persons that Mr. Skerritt gravitates to. Is that what we are seeing? Is that what we're seeing here? A systematic approach to take out our opposition, arrest them, jail them, incapacitate them. So I'm just urging us Dominicans and people listening to us, try to disabuse your mind that because you're supporting the Labour Party, then what you're hearing here, you can dismiss it as being insignificant. It is not. I believe our country, there's a lot of things about our country that is at stake with what is going on here in this country. And I'm urging you to pay attention to what is happening. Pay attention to the extent to which the people of this country are being provoked. And we need to be careful about what we are doing. So this thing about Thompson Fontaine is not something that we should just cocoon and take lightly and pass on. We need to pay attention to it. And we need to pay attention to who is driving, who is the driver behind all of this. And pay attention to the fact that when you demean your people and call them cockroach, cacadon, all that, you are deliberately setting up a situation to turn Dominicans on Dominicans. We have seen the situation in Rwanda. Kigali, Paul Kagame was here just the other day, was in Barbados yesterday in the region. And I think I hope we saw him, and it reminds us of what happened out there and to do everything to avoid that happening here. Because that guy, Tony Estefan, will, if we're not careful, will be a cog in the wheel of what could happen in our country. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Prime Minister Edison James. Opposition leader Lennox Linton, and you are also the current leader of the United Workers' Party. You have also been in charge of incitement. Now, you heard the lawyers talk about the law, and clearly that case of incitement appears to be weak. You heard Irving Andre, you heard Gabriel Christian, they talked about the law. You heard Edison James talk about some facts. You heard him talk about incitement, but to me, most of the incitement he was talking about there was was not by people who were arrested and charged. You seem to be talking about incitement by other people who have never been arrested or charged. Lennox, Linton, maybe you can tell us your side of the story.
Thank you very much, Sheridan. Good evening, the gentleman at Master Control, Mr. Lambert Charles. Good evening, sir. Good evening to Mr. Edison James and former Prime Minister. And good evening to Dr. Irving Andre and Gabriel Christian. I got a little confused listening to Sheridan earlier as to who was junior and who was senior between Irving and Gabriel. I gathered that Gabriel is the baby among us, but
well, Lennox, I don't think you should introduce that thing there. No, don't talk
you,
about
you,
that.
don't, you don't want to introduce that theme, no. But I wanted to clear the confusion in my head because, as far as I know, Gabriel is the baby in our midst.
Okay. All
so I was led to believe over the years. But many moons ago, the French philosopher Frederick Bastiat said, and I quote him at the start of these few brief remarks: when plunder becomes a way of life for a group of men in society, over the course of time, they develop for themselves a legal system that justifies it and a moral code that glorifies it. In Dominica today, 2022, we have a legal system in the hands of persons who I saw on display, some of whom I saw on display in the magistrate's court at that bail hearing for Thompson Fontaine yesterday. And it confirms that, in fact, those who have seen plunder as a way of life for them in Dominica are indeed, and in fact, building that legal system to justify the plunder. And when you listen to Anthony Astafan and his brutal racist attacks on born Dominicans of my skin color, you have to conclude that he is one of the primary drivers of that moral code that glorifies the brutalization, the tyranny, the oppression of ordinary people in Dominica under the broad banner of politics. I want to make the observation, first of all, that Dr. Thompson Fontaine was born in Grand Fort, in Dominica. He's a son of the soil. He grew up in Dominica. He studied in the United States. He taught a number of people in Dominica. And for his outstanding academic achievements in the field of economics, he ended up working for the International Monetary Fund for 14 years in all different parts of the world. Subsequent to that, he served as an international consultant. He was with us in Dominica in 2014, offering himself to serve the people of Dominica in government. He didn't succeed. He attempted to use his expertise and skills to build something that would benefit the farmers across Dominica. But so full of hate for him were his political opponents that they branded him as a huckster. They said the most derogatory things for him because he was trying to find outlets for the agricultural products of Dominica. He was hated, he was denigrated, placed in that category of non-human beings, cockroach, pig, worthless. And against the background of those kind of descriptions and that level of hatred from his own people in the Labour Party of Dominica, he landed a job on an advisory team working with the government of South Sudan. This was done through the good agencies of the United Nations, the family of nations, where responsible governments got together and agreed that among themselves they would help South Sudan with its governance issues in a situation where parties who were at war, physical war with each other in South Sudan, came together in a government of national unity. You have 31 ministers of government in that country effectively reporting to this team of international consultants provided by the family of nations to help South Sudan. Dr. Thompson Fontaine, after being there and starting on the economic advisory team, has become the number three person on that team as the deputy chief of staff responsible for strategy. In that position, he supervises the international experts who are working with the Sudan government in the field of governance, humanitarian affairs, security, the economy, transitional human rights issues, and all of justice issues and so on. He supervises that team as a number three person on the advisory team to the government of South Sudan. Because of that, he has earned diplomatic status in South Sudan. He didn't purchase it. He earned it on the strength of his outstanding professional work as a global citizen. Serving with honor, serving with dignity. Under that diplomatic rank in South Sudan, he enjoys immunity from criminal jurisdiction. And he cannot be liable. He's not liable to any form of arrest or detention in South Sudan. But here in Dominica, where he's trying to serve his country, and because he's been involved in the politics of Dominica, part of the United Workers' Party, seeking to be in the government of Dominica to provide good governance for the best Dominica for all Dominicans. He is subject to bogus charges of incitement, obstruction of police, basically for the expression of the democratic right, the constitutionally enshrined right to freedom of expression, the right to criticize, the right to dissent, the right to disagree with what the government is doing. That's all he has done. And they trumped up a charge of incitement, they trumped up a charge of obstruction against him. And because he could not attend court, there was this bench warrant out for his arrest. The bench warrant, as the lawyers will tell you, is to compel him to come to court. But there was a bench warrant, as Edison James indicated earlier, for him, for both of us, in December of 2019. We had been in and out of court regularly since 2018, September. And on the one occasion when we thought that, as usual, the court hearing was going to be in the afternoon, it was actually in the morning when we were preparing to go in the afternoon. There was a bench warrant prepared to be signed for signing by the magistrate to arrest us and compel us to come to court. When that news reached Marigot, the young people of Marigot decided they were going to shut down the village and nobody could pass through there. That's what triggered the events before the election of 2019. Right now, as we speak, you have Thompson Fontaine up against an incitement charge, Edison James up against an incitement charge, Hector John up against an incitement charge, Brian Linton up against an incitement charge, and this one is incitement to commit treason because he advised the police force publicly that all was not well within the police force and they needed to stop functioning like a goon squad for Roosevelt Skerritt and a legitimate police officer of the state of Dominica. But let's go back to the Thompson Fontaine matter, because in this you see all the elements of how the criminal law is being weaponized against the political opponents and the patriotic citizens of Dominica, the political opponents of the Roosevelt Square administration and the patriots of Dominica. The bench warrant is out for Thompson Fontaine's arrest. He arrives in Dominica, as the other members of the panel indicated, on his own volition, and he is picked up by police in execution of that warrant. Now, the authorities were prepared to arrest him because they had advance notification from the airline system, Services Dominica, that he was arriving on a flight from Miami. And they knew that before the flight left Miami that he was coming in. So they were able to they were prepared to send 3 van loads, over a dozen police officers, to Melville Hall to pick him up on Saturday afternoon. They were also prepared for the Monday morning when he was supposed to come into court, because remember, the arrest warrant is to compel him to come to court. The next court day is Monday, so they want to bring him to court on Monday, and they're prepared to cordon off the court compound in Roseau and to have dozens of police officers manning barricades, barring entrance to the court compound, an open court. They were prepared for that. But they were not prepared to hand over the warrant, which they executed, to Thompson Fontaine or his defense counsel, so that was the reason for delay number 1 in the bail hearing on Monday. A hearing which I am told normally takes in Dominica 30 to 45 minutes. It was supposed to begin at 9 o'clock in the morning. It didn't finish until 6:30 Monday afternoon. 9.5 hours later. 9.5 hours. The Thompson Fontaine is back and forth from the holding cell at the magistrate's court to the defendant's dock in the magistrate's courtroom. Before that, he had spent 2 nights with the bugs, with the cockroaches, and with the rats, and with the stench in the police cell. I told you who is driving the moral code that is glorifying the treatment being meted out to those who oppose and those who express the democratic right to freedom of expression in Dominica at this time. Remember what he refers to Dominicans as, cockroaches. So what they wanted to ensure, no doubt under his guidance, was that Thompson Fontaine spent his time with the cockroaches in the jail cell. He spent his time with the rats in the jail cell. He spent his time with the bugs in the jail cell, because they don't consider him to be human. And they want to remind him that as far as they're concerned, that is who he is. He's not human. So they will dehumanize him. They will demonize him at will. And they will make it appear to the people of Dominica that something is wrong with this outstanding global citizen, because they do not like him. And you know what they said? You know the justification? Thompson Fontaine was coming to Dominica to challenge Lennox Linton for the leadership of the United Workers' Party. And what they're saying with that is very interesting, you know. Thompson Fontaine is coming to challenge for the leadership. So Thompson Fontaine, I love the brother. Thompson Fontaine may well emerge as the leader of the United Workers' Party. We love him, we respect him. We know of his accomplishments and skills. He is an honorable gentleman who fully is prepared to lead his country. So he takes over from the existing leader of the United Workers' Party. They're getting themselves ready for that. They're getting themselves ready for when he takes over They will go to the people of Dominica and say, this man is no more than a common criminal, a cockroach, a rat, a bug. He's nothing. But when you peel that away and you go for the real Thompson Fontaine, you find the outstanding global citizen, the number 3 person on the advisory team of responsible governments helping the government of South Sudan, where he heads strategy for the team and is responsible for the international consultants working in the various areas requiring attention and assistance to the government of Sudan at this time. So make no mistake about it, that the criminal law has been weaponized against us in the opposition to the sitting government of Dominica. I had the example in my personal life of mercenaries from Britain coming to my home in Mount Daniel on a criminal trespass to plant false evidence of criminal conduct. That happened in 2019. It was reported to the police. To this day, the police have done absolutely nothing, which means, as far as they're concerned, these gentlemen who are from Britain are immune from prosecution in Dominica for crimes against the people of Dominica. But while they have given that immunity to British criminals, they are crucifying and persecuting Thompson Fontaine, one of our very own, one of our very best, because he has dared to criticize them and to oppose the way they're running government. And what is there not to oppose? Holding $4.2 billion of state resources that have been collected over 4 years from the sale of passport is a crime. It is a violation of the Constitution. It's a violation of the rule of law in Dominica. It is something that the police should have concerned themselves with ever since the disclosure was made in the parliament. Nobody has asked me any question, and indeed, they're totally not interested in it. We have ministers of government themselves who describe scenes of racketeering in departments and ministries of government. Racketeering. Racketeering means, correct me, laws, if I'm wrong, organized crime. So they have organized crime going on in the Department of Labor, the Division of Labor, for example. And no less a person than the Prime Minister has alluded to that over the years. There's organized crime taking place in the Fisheries Department of the Ministry of Agriculture, for example. Where is the criminal law with respect to these activities? There was a famous case referred to as the Baby Sarah case involving a minister of government. We were told that there would have been an investigation. Trevor Johnson's digital devices, his cell phone, his computers were seized, held for over a year. The public has no information up to now. What was the result of those investigations which implicated a minister of government in criminal wrongdoing? Incitement, obstruction, etc., is only relevant to the criminal law in Dominica when the government seeks to pin bogus charges on the members of the opposition. It doesn't matter how many ministers of government are involved in criminal conduct. The minister who publicly advocated that Lennox Linton should disappear. Any alley of MECA, go with him, take him somewhere. No police officer is interested in that. as Edison James indicated. Hunt them down, throw hot water on them, bomb them like Al-Qaeda is bombed out of existence, take them out. Nothing happens with these real examples of criminal conduct. But the same people who have immunized themselves from that are the ones who are trumping up charges to go after their political opponents and the patriots of the blessed land. It's not going to stand. It is going to cause great confusion in the Commonwealth of Dominica because injustice never is allowed to stand indefinitely. There is no sine die. There is no injustice sine die. It doesn't happen. It comes to an end. And it comes to an end, it begins to end when the people are prepared to stand. I was amazed. We've just come out of the Easter season, and Sunday just gone was Resurrection Sunday, not Resurrection Sunday, Mercy Sunday. The Sunday after Easter Sunday, Resurrection Day, Mercy Sunday. That's the day that Thompson Fontaine spent in the jail cell with no justification whatsoever. And the people of Dominica were shouting for his release. Sheridan, members of the panel tonight, it's important that this government pauses, this government takes stock of what it's doing, and it ceases and it desists from its ways of persecution, harassment, and tyranny against the patriots and members of the opposition. This is not in the country's best interest. At all, at all, at all. And it is time for these bogus charges to be withdrawn. Edison James pointed out to you that there are a number of witnesses. There were 75. I think the number is down now to 64. There's 64 witnesses in the incitement matter against me, which also involves Thompson Fontaine. That incitement charge at Thompson Fontaine, Edison James and myself have a similar charge. There are 64 witnesses, 64 people who gave statements to the police. None of the witness statements, and this is important, in none of the witness statements is there anybody who says that Thompson Fontaine, Edison James, or Lennox Linton incited them or influenced to do anything at all on the night of the 7th of February, 2017. So all they have, and all they're paying millions of dollars to the Trinidad Council for, is to carry these bogus charges through the court and hoping that on some technicality or some bogus connection to circumstantial evidence or whatever else they have, I don't know, that something will stick. Or even if it doesn't stick, to have Lennox Linton, Edison James, Thompson Fontaine, Hector John, with these bogus charges over their heads indefinitely, bogus criminal charges over their head indefinitely, which really is a violation of their rights and really is an infringement on who they are and what they should represent for the people and what they represent for the people of Dominica. So they know they're not going to succeed, but they know it is in their political interest to have Edison James criminally accused, and Lennox Linton criminally accused, and Hector John criminally accused, and Nicholas George criminally accused, and Thompson Fontaine criminally accused. When is it going to end?
Well,
when is it going to end? Because it cannot be that the very same people who commit crimes in order to win elections in Dominica. Treating is a crime. Bribery is a crime. We have seen those engaged in elections in Dominica. We have seen court challenges. There was a criminal case filed against 15 members of the government in 2015 for treating. The CCJ ruled that that case should go to court. And then in the legal system that these people, these plunderers have created for themselves, the case was nulliprossed. by a DPP who is on contract. Part of the arrangements of creating or making a legal system that will justify the tyranny and the abuse of opposition and the patriotic forces in Dominica. It cannot stand, it will not stand.
Lennox, I want to thank you so much for that. I mean, I want to take a break because, we want to give our callers a chance to get involved and to have their say in this. On the other side of the break, I will go to Dr. Andre again because you can see what is happening here. We can see where the incitement really is, and we can see where the law is looking. But as I go to Lambie, I just wanted to make one point because Lennox mentioned a few things about Thompson Fontaine. And what I found was incredible. It was truly remarkable. Was when I listened to Thompson Fontaine talking to Matt. And this is a man, as you described, Lennox, who's treated very, very well in South Sudan. But he came to Dominica. Now here he is living on the floor with the rats and the roaches and the bugs. But he's not concerned about that. The man is expressing concern for the people around him who are suffering the same fate. The guy who's asking for bread and the guy who's asking and he's listening to the stories of the people who are in there with him and saying, look, how can I help these people when I get out of there? Is that the kind of person that you want to send to jail? I mean, as Lennox was saying, is that the kind of person, is that a person you want to treat like a roach, like a kakado? No, this man is thinking about his fellow man. In spite of his difficulties, what he's facing there. You travel for how many hours? He's probably tired and fatigued and, jet lagged and all that. But here he is just thinking about his fellow man. Lambie, I want to go with you on the other side of the break, Dr. Andre. I might ask you to comment on that, as you get us going again. So Lambie, let's take a break and you can take the people's calls and maybe just give us one little ad of Nidcliffe just before you take the break.
Nature Island Dominica Civil Liberties Foundation, Inc. Nidcliffe, uniting our Kalinago and Afro-Caribbean nature islanders and friends of Dominica at home and abroad, coming together to help preserve the integrity of Dominica's democracy, human rights, and civil liberties, ensuring free, fair, and competitive elections on a level playing field within a system that guarantees freedom of expression, belief and association, respect for the inalienable rights of individuals and minorities, respect for the rule of law, for free communications media, and free from psychological, mental, and physical abuse of women, minors, the elderly, and young men. Meantime, the people of Salisbury were tear-gassed and shot at while they slept the night before the general election in December 2019 by local law enforcement aided and abetted by regional security forces. Patriots appear ready to take the biggest step to fight this cancer that is ravaging every organ of good governance in Dominica. Patriots appear ready to join the legal fight to have the highest court in the region decide once and for all if Dominica should continue to operate as a rogue state where the state's coffers may be starved while secretive accounts in unknown places are filled to the brim with taxpayers' money. Nidcliffe, join the fight to save Dominica from this malevolent cancer. Make your contribution, however modest, to support the legal challenge to account for Dominica's millions. The law is on your side. Every patriot should be on your side. Nidcliffe, support our radiothon, fundraising events, subscriptions, GoFundMe, and other initiatives to help raise funds to support a legal challenge against the siphoning of public funds from the Consolidated Fund and other initiatives and actions. Nidcliffe, Nature Island Dominica Civil Liberties Foundation, Inc., working to help unify and build Dominica and our Afro-Caribbean and Kalinago brothers and sisters at home and abroad. Nidcliffe, fighting to save our nature island, Dominica.
The Global View and Q. We're taking your calls now. The numbers are 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257, 305-432-9624. And we are taking your calls. There's someone on the line. Caller, please go ahead.
Good evening, Lambie. And good evening, Mr. G, Prime Minister Edison James, Honorable Lennox Linton. Mr. G, I just heard Mr. Lennox Linton talking about or hoping that these guys will change their ways or change the way of doing things. But it will never stop because the Dominican people are not yet ready to stop them. Because that's the way they survive the political career. That's the way they stay in power. So they could hide and deceive the people all the resources of the state. But I have a question. Before I have the question, Mr. G, I also think that we should really look at the way we appoint our judges, our police commissioner, and those CAPSEC and all the statutory boards, because the way it is right now, the Prime Minister, he doesn't even consult. They say he was an English teacher and he don't know what is the meaning of informing and consulting. So I don't know if you understand it or if it's willful. But I think that the Prime Minister or anybody could appoint a judge or a police commissioner, but I really think they should have to come before the Parliament to question them, look at the record, vet them, because these people, we don't know who they are. And we are giving them the power to govern our affairs, and we have no idea as to the integrity, the honesty, maybe even the ability. You understand? Because you cannot tell me you're going to put a gag order, and that's the question I have for Mr. Andre. What are the requirements needed to put a gag order on a defendant? I heard of it before, but it happens where you have hinderous crime committed, and maybe the court doesn't allow the assaultant or the person committing the crime to maybe make money out of the actions, or in some cases of national security issues. But when I heard it, I know that is a violation of your rights, because you cannot tell me you're going to stop me from speaking and don't give me the reason why. I'm not a lawyer, so I would really like to know the reason for that.
Okay, thank you, caller. Caller, we have a short time. You ask a question, allow the learned judge to respond.
Okay, all right. Okay, Lambi, I'll allow him. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead. Well, with respect to that condition about refrain from speaking to the media about this case, I'm not going to criticize the justice of the magistrate. In fact, that is probably the type of advice Dr. Fontaine's lawyer would have given him. Because again, if he speaks publicly about the case, he runs the risk of things that he may say about it come back to haunt him if this matter goes to trial. So I'm not very concerned that that he personally is refrained from discussing the case as relates to him. Again, as I said, I used to be in private practice, and certainly that is a caution I used to issue to clients. Don't discuss the case with anyone unless you are in a position that you have to, because again, you may say things that might come back to haunt you. So I'm not very concerned about this. But what the abomination is this? Some folks who support the other side, they criticize you or criticize the opposition for discussing matters that are before the court, but they have no difficulty doing the very same thing when it suits their purposes. When it is time to denigrate individuals, to castigate them, to criminalize them, to be quite frank with you. So we have to understand the motivation for all this, and it's a point that has been made. You demonize individuals to a point where it becomes acceptable to wreak violence against them. And that is the lesson of the Rwandans. When you demonize individuals, you refer to them in disparaging terms. It's almost like you're sending the message, that they're not worth, or they are ideal targets. There'll be no recrimination. That's what happens when you demonize a people. If you're a student of literature, you may remember that famous thing from a British king: who will rid me of this priest? And it was a priest who was murdered in the cathedral because the subliminal message had been sent: who will rid me of this individual? Who will take him away? And this is the dangerous undercurrent that we have to deal with. These are not innocent words. These are not legitimate criticisms. These are dangerous subliminal messages being sent to people. And that is why we have to be concerned. But in summary, quite frankly, if I was Dr. Fontaine's counsel, I would caution him, irrespective of whether or not there's a gag order, to speak publicly about the case. That's the advice I would have given him anyway.
Yes, Lambi, I think you might want to take a couple more calls before we move on.
Yes, sir. The caller, please go ahead.
Yes, good evening, gentlemen. How are you doing?
Good evening, how are you?
I'm doing fine. I heard Mr. James said earlier on, Mustafa, about 70-something weaknesses to that incitement case.
Right.
I would like to ask a question. I would like to know I'm asking a question to Melissa. How many of these 70-something witnesses to government in that case, incitement case, how many of them are Navy SEALs? And how many of them are snipers? And I would like to ask another question. I would like to ask, were they paid? What happened to that? What went on in Roseau on the 17th of February 2017? Were they paid to create the havoc that was in Roseau? That's a question I'm asking. So who want to answer? Not on your panel, outside there. Another thing I observed yesterday by the court. I observed the magistrate keep leaving the court at a certain time and always coming outside and like in some kind of heated argument with somebody, trying to maybe get something. I think somebody was questioning and the person answering him. How you could see the movement of his hand because he was away from us. We couldn't hear what he was saying, but he was way up between the what you call that building, the Nazi building, Fresh Market, and the court, and you could see like he was asking somebody asking a question, talking to somebody. That's how he was getting on. I'd like to know who exactly was he talking to and who was feeding him information by telling him what he should do and how he should go about doing this. Have a blessed night. I'm listening.
Good night to you as well. Thanks for calling. And you want to take another call, Lambi?
On the overseas line, please go ahead quickly and watch your timing.
Yes, good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
All right. A couple years ago, like maybe 6 years ago, I was watching GIS on television in Dominica. And there was Mr. Blackmore talking. He was telling the people about the government is pursuing a socialist, move. Like they're trying to make Dominica like follow the footsteps of Venezuela and Cuba, where you have a socialist government in power. And the people will be getting free things like free housing, you get scholarships, and then you get you get free food. The government every now and then they come and they distribute food to their supporters. But what he was not telling them is that in these places like Cuba and Venezuela, and now we're talking about Russia and China, the opposition is crushed. They're going to crush anybody who opposes the government, will be persecuted, will be crushed and jailed. That's what he was not saying. So what we haven't done, they have carried out, dragged Dominica now into the area where we are just like Cuba and Venezuela. the opposition will be crushed, and they will show you the sharing food right next to your neighbor will be getting food, and you will not get. And they'll watch in the middle of your eyes and show you that you don't support the government, you will not get nothing. That is what Kerry has dragged Dominica into. So Dominica now is a little Cuba and a Venezuela. Good night.
Good night to you too. Lam, do you want to take no more calls before we go on?
Yes, call up quickly. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good night.
Good night.
Yeah, I'm a former policeman, right? And listen, I'm humbled by the humility of Dr. Thompson Fontaine. I know them to be that family to be law-abiding citizens. And I worked with his brother, Melchior Fontaine, in the CID. And he retired as a sergeant. He was a very astute police officer. Brilliant. We worked together, investigate, did many crimes. And what they did to him, honestly speaking, was a travesty. Because at present, he has two brothers who are serving within the Commonwealth of Dominica Police Force. Corporal Earl Fontaine, who is presently in CID, and the next one called Roskin. And these guys never intervened. And I investigated matters. And what I'm saying is that in a case of such magnitude, which was really, when I look at it, probably a misdemeanor, the police could have, they had the information. Yeah, the police could have, or the police administration, knowing the prominence of the man, knowing how close that the family is interrelated with the police. All they had to do was to just go to just meet him halfway, have him sign the document and tell him your hearing is at court on the Monday, and just release the man. That is all he had to do. But you see what is happening for our police administration, and especially the managers in the police force. They are not independent thinkers, and they are not objective. They don't read the law. They are just like puppets on a string. They are not assertive, and that is the problem that we have presently. And therefore, the professionalism has just gone down the road, Like a gentleman like ASP Wick, who I have worked with also, he would have been objective. He would have been assertive. And therefore, when you think independently, the politicians cannot do whatever they want with you. They would have to respect you. You know, even the Minister of National Security, we work together, right? And he would have to respect these fellows that he put in high office. And that is what the police force at present is lacking. And in no way should they even take this gentleman and put in the cell to sit on a cold cell. Because I've seen within my time, even foreigners, even fellows we have arrested, even during drug trade. And they did not even give them the ration, the dry bread and things. They would get meals from them from the canteen. You know, they would put a sponge for them. They would put cardboard for them. So why do you have to treat your very own that way? It is just oppressive behavior. And I think I studied some law, and there's a certain thing in the law which you call, under the criminal law procedure, which is called atrofus, and which is called not giving a fair hearing. I think the lawyers should review that, and based on the review of that, no way that based on that oppressive behavior that this man should be charged for anything like incitement. I stand to be corrected.
Thank you, caller.
Have a good night.
Thank you, caller.
Thank you, and have a good night yourself.
On the overseas line, we have, it's 9:28. Be brief.
Yeah, Lambi, good evening. Good evening to the panel.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, I didn't catch everybody, but I caught Brother Edison and Brother Lennox. And I wanted to, I heard the plea to the government and, asking, but I want to tell Edison and Lennox, this government doesn't listen to nobody from the United Workers' Party. That's the first part we have to get fundamentally these conversations moving. And talking to that government is a waste of time. It's a waste of time. These charges and these conditions for bail and all these movements there is based on one thing: putting fear into leaders and people of movements' minds that they cannot act against the government. What I want to know is, what are you guys going to do? Because you see, we have to challenge this thing legally. We have to challenge that 5-year thing, just like you did that multi-cross thing with the DPP and whatever. Why can't we take an approach to that case? Same way. For that evidence to be addressed, you know? These conditions for bail, these things, I mean, what are we going to do, you know? I know there's need for money and whatever. I call upon the people to support the fight but I want to hear a more preemptive posture moving forward, my brothers. Even at this panel, I would love to hear that moving forward. We cannot talk to the government anymore, brethren. We cannot talk to them anymore. They don't listen. They don't give a damn. They don't think you have the power to challenge them. And I really would like for us in these conversations to start talking, taking it into a next level, because these guys don't listen to anybody. And the momentum, in a way, momentum was established this weekend, and I hope we do not let it slip away. It is time for us to challenge this government. Talking to that government is a waste of time. Begging that government is a waste of time. A waste of time. Peace and blessings, brother.
Thank you very much, caller.
Thanks a lot for that. We'll get an answer to that question. Lambi, we're going to move on for a little bit. If calls start coming a little bit later on, you'll interrupt us and we'll try to take the calls. But Dr. Andre, I wanted to go back to you for a moment there, because the callers have raised a number of questions here. I mean, you answered one or two of them at the beginning, but then this last caller here, the other caller before that, the lady, I think she said her questions were not meant for us to answer. I think she was directing the question elsewhere. So I hope she get those answers from those quarters. But this caller came in asking a question. Listen, it's not one talking to the government. They're not going to change their ways. They're not going to change what they're doing. What are we going to do to challenge the case and the charges, and then these bail conditions, being imposed? And one last person also was a police officer. He said the same thing. The lawyers need to look at that. Are we thinking that there is a good chance of challenging this case here, challenging those charges that have been placed, challenges that kind of bail condition? Because as you said earlier, Dr. Andre and Gabriel Christian, it's been 5 years and nothing seems to be going forward. And then we heard from Mr. Lennox, Linton, and Prime Minister Edison James. There are so many witnesses, but no one knows where the witnesses are. Only maybe 20% of those witnesses have been cross-examined. It's going to take another 10 years to cross-examine the rest of the witnesses. Will these people remember anything at all? Are 3/4 of them migrated, or how many of them have died? And so on. So, Dr. Andre, maybe you can help us. Do you think there's a reasonable chance of challenging this thing successfully?
Well, I know that there are many things that could be said about the criminal justice system, but the fact of the matter is that there's still a number of avenues that can be pursued within that justice system. First of all, there can always be an application to vary the bail that was imposed on Thompson, or to vacate some of the conditions. There's no doubt that that remedy is there. After a certain passage of time, there can always be an application to dismiss the charges on the basis of lack of prosecution, unreasonable delay, the extreme prejudice to an accused who is held in limbo for years without any light at the end of the rainbow or the tunnel. So there are these different avenues. I mean, yes, the justice system winds slowly, but the fact of the matter is that these are avenues that must be pursued. You don't pursue them and then criticize the justice system. And obviously, the public has to be sensitized about these issues. If you don't, it will become the normalization of unequal treatment in the island. People will just take it for granted. And if people become desensitized to the daily infringement of the rights of persons, particularly persons who seem to have a different political preference, then that is a dangerous journey. that is a dangerous place for a community to be in, you know. So, yes, the last caller asked about what can be done, but again, let us give credit to what persons are doing. There are people, take for instance, Athi in his own way, in a very peaceful way. He's sensitizing people about some of these injustices and encouraging people to exercise their rights. That is being done. There are organizations, in Jam, for example, organized something this evening to sensitize the people of Grand Fort with respect to the ordeal of Dr. Fontaine. They're doing something. Then there's an organization called Nitcliff, which is seeking to raise funds to help challenge some of the egregious things that have been done in Dominica. So these different streams are coming together, and that augurs well for our future as a democratic nation. But that is a struggle that has to be continued. People have to be sensitized about their rights. People have to be sensitized about the deprivation of rights, because they have to understand and realize that they can't take comfort behind the fact that they may be associated with the color red, and those who are victimized associated with the color blue, because quite frankly, things have a habit of changing when we least expect it. So I think we as a mature nation, we have to be sensitized about those types of issues, and we have to be sensitized about the fact that there's nothing wrong if people come together to protect what they have. In fact, that is the very essence of democracy. So it's a continuous process of education, and there are people in the community who are doing good work along those lines, and we should support them in every way, shape that we can. There are many more groups now working towards a democratic Dominica than there was, for example, 5 years ago. So we just have to continue that impetus, that initiative, because after all, the rule of law has to be the guiding light of any democratic Dominica.
And Lambi, if you want to take a call now before I go over to Dr. Tony Gabriel Christian.
Yes, on the overseas line, you're still there? Please go ahead quickly.
Yes, I'm still there. I just cannot understand how Dominicans can allow that man, he's not a man, that Tony Astafan to get away with the way he describes black people in Dominica. It's unbelievable. But I worked for the Astafan years ago, and I know his mother is a racist woman. These people are racist. And where's your prime minister tonight? In Cuba. What do you expect? That's why they treat people like that. He's a criminal, and someday he will get his own. Treating our people like slaves, it is terrible. Terrible. I just can't understand this animal. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Now, let me just say this, Lambi. I don't know that Mrs. Astafan is a racist woman. I don't know that. And I don't know these people are animals either, just for the sake of clarifying that. But I wanted to go, Lambi, you can just interrupt us as we go along if you have a call. But Gabriel Christian, I want to go back to the question of challenges, because that is what we're discussing here tonight. The challenges, because you see, after a case is 5 years old, 5 years old, cannot find the evidence, cannot find the witnesses. Do you think there is no chance? Yeah.
The thing about it is, there's several important things that your listener said. The last listener, for instance, his frustration is the danger that Mr. Linton, Honorable Lennox Linton, leader of the parliamentary opposition, who's a responsible Dominican, is warning the government about. It's the racism that our former prime minister is warning the government about. You see, when you, for political expediency and in your desire to hold on to power, you begin to inculcate into your partisans and supporters that kind of rot, that kind of ignorance, that kind of cheerleading that Prime Minister James referred to what happened in Rwanda with the Hutus and the Tutsis, you see. Because he's a thinking man. But they don't appeal to reason. Here on the Global View and Q, you have a judge, and prime minister, leader of the opposition, and we don't engage in that kind of cannibalism. We try to engage in reasoned judgment. For instance, we are saying that in regular judiciary, we understand that justice delayed is justice denied. And I've seen judges upbraid state's attorneys. Counsel, this case was charged last year. Your Honor, if I can get a continuance, we don't have this officer counsel. If I allow you to do this for this person, then everybody else who's sitting here is going to have the same thing happen. Case dismissed. Routinely, the judges don't allow the prosecutors to run ramshod over the defendants. I'm sure Justice Andre can speak to that. If the judges believe that the case is being prolonged unduly and it's past the Hicks rule, you're out of here. This is the same country that the Prime Minister has his children born in. Ironically, some of the same people who he bribed to come down to Dominica to vote, to place the tyranny on our backs, reside within that system where due process. Just the other day, a Jamaican guy came to my office to pick up a check because a policeman pulled him out of his car and roughed him up. He didn't kill him. He didn't do a George Floyd. Police officers were put on leave. They were investigated. They were punished. The county paid damages. That's what's happening here. Okay? And so when folks talk about due process of law or lack thereof, we see what happens when it does not exist in Dominica. We saw a policeman, or policemen plural, brutally kicking a bus driver leader. It's on tape. I do not know that anyone filed a citizen's complaint. Is there a citizen's complaint board? We need to have a citizen's complaint board for the police service. Because as long as police officers believe they can act with impunity, as the police officer who called earlier this evening indicated, the quality of service of the force is going to deteriorate. We're now having in Dominica the exact Venezuela, yes, and Nicaragua playbook. That's what they do. 7 candidates. 7 candidates for the president of Nicaragua were criminalized. They used their judiciary as they're using it in Dominica. Don't be surprised if they find through their friend Byron some artifice to say that if you have a pending criminal charge, you're ineligible for electoral office. Don't be surprised. Don't be surprised. They cannot win the regular way. It has to be bribery, intimidation, persecution. And so I'm asking all Dominicans this evening, those of you who are overseas and who may have $1 to spare, put that there in the defense of your country's democracy. The H. Allen Dominica Civil Liberties Foundation is calling on you. For those of us in Dominica, support the democracy activists. Support the parliamentary opposition and the Team Dominica concept of NJAM, the trade unions. Encourage our young people to not be recruited as snipers or SEALs for the member of Roseau Central, who really doesn't have any interest in a Londonderry type youth camp to teach the vocational arts, as in plumbing and agriculture, and carpentry and masonry, so that our young people who are gangsterized can be the ones doing the work of all these projects that the CBI money is funding. No, rather they want to have them make that pilgrimage to the Red Clinic on the 5th floor of the Financial Center, you see. So we're talking about how we can get our young people to adopt a degree of civic virtue, to have them understand that we are working for their best interest, so they do not have to be spectators in your own land and to be walked upon every 5 years, then to be given a red shirt and a red hat and a red horn to jump up and down in the sun playing the fool, you see. So that's how we get out of this difficulty, by organizing, by paying our dues, so we can bring pressure to bear internally for change and bring pressure to bear externally so that our people overseas can support democracy in Dominica and eradicate the tyranny that's been foisted on our backs, that has our honorable brothers and sisters who are trying their best to represent our interests be criminalized, you see. We have to rally around together and bind ourselves in one common union. And I'm confident, as I think the lady's name, I think, is Blue. She asked a question that was very pointed. And I appreciate her. And I appreciate those like her. And I wish you were more like her. God bless her. God bless the brother in Delaware. God bless Brother Rossi and all the others who call and to support and who show conscience.
Let's take a call, Lamb, if you want to take a call now.
Good evening, caller. Please go ahead.
Yes, good night, Sheridan, Mr. James, and Mr. Linton. Mr. Linton.
Yeah, good night.
Doctor.
Good evening, sir.
Doctor. And Gabriel.
Good evening.
I have a question. One of the criteria of the bill is saying that the man have to report every Monday and Tuesday and Fridays, and he has to notify the government within 72 days, 72 hours before he leaves anywhere. Isn't he a working man? And how are we going to contact that thing? Is the lawyers can work on that situation because he's working? And how is 72 hours before you have to notify and those that thing? He's a working man. So it says some lawyers or somebody have to look at it and see what can happen. Okay? I don't have a question.
Judge Andre mentioned that, in fact, and it's true. You can always modify bail in the United States, and in the British common law system, you're allowed to modify conditions of bail as well.
Yes, clearly. I mean, this is something that needs to be done. I think what the callers are saying, something needs to be happened to challenge the bail conditions and to challenge those charges, because the charges seem to be frivolous. The case does not appear to be going anywhere, and certainly if Dominicans really wish Netcliffe to help to support those challenges, then it's very simple. Go to the website, nidclf.org, make a contribution, as many of you as you can. It doesn't have to be a lot of money. Make a simple donation of whatever you think you can. Let us accumulate enough resources so that we can pay for the legal defense funds for some of the activities that we're talking about. Lam, you want to take another call before we go? Go right ahead.
On the overseas line, please go ahead.
The point is, Dominica is just a democratic country on paper. Otherwise, Dominica is a socialist country. You guys keep talking about democracy. Just think of the Battle of Jericho. God had to use force to liberate Jericho. That's the only thing that's going to bring change in Dominica. These guys are not going to live there just like that. Force will be the only way to get them to hell out of office.
Thanks a lot.
Yes, and I was saying, the gentleman, that it seems to me the right thing to do, and I think Dominicans are thinking that the right thing to do is to put some challenges up, because you cannot have cases like this just going on indefinitely. Is this thing going to go on for the next 10 years? And if what Gabriel is concerned about comes to pass, then what happens? If, for example, the recommendations for electoral reform and campaign finance reform that are upon us, if it were to indicate that anyone who wishes to run for election will be disqualified if they have a pending criminal offense or charge against them, if they're disqualified from running, then what happens? Then all the government does is put all the opposition people, run charges against them, and then while they are pending charges, they can't run. Is that what we're up against these days? So I think that it is very important that these charges be challenged. So, Mr. Linton and Prime Minister James, I want to go back to you all now, because you're the guys who are under the gun. You're the guys who are facing those incitement charges. Lennox Linton is a man who's up for election. And basically what happens, you have this incitement charge against you if the new conditions, if the new regulations and the new laws, electoral law says that if you have a pending criminal charge against you, you're disqualified, what happens? So Lennox, you want to have a first go at it?
If the if the system will now use the legal system that has been weaponized, that is being weaponized against the patriots of this land, whether it comes to the stage where you have a bar on persons who are criminally accused from contesting elections. So all they need is not that they're proven guilty of whatever crime they're accused of, but just that they have the accusation against them, then that disqualifies them from contesting elections. Well, that would be right on target and on cue with all that has been going on in building that legal system that justifies the rape and plunder of the resources of Dominica. So as Gabriel said earlier, it would not be surprising. But of course, the things that get done to us in Dominica get done to us because we, the people, tolerate them. This is our country. The power that the government, the people in government have to perform functions on behalf of the people was transferred to them by the people. They have taken the position that the people will no longer have the right to leverage that power. They will decide who the government should be and if the government should change at all and to who it should change, not the people. So it is not the free vote of conscience that decides government of the people, by the people, for the people in Dominica anymore. It is the bribes of the ruling party for the last 25 years, the treats, the past 20 years, the treats, the bribes, the illegal conduct, quite frankly, of that rogue administration that just keeps doing without any real pushback from the people of Dominica. And a lot of people sit back and they say, well, okay, it's you guys in opposition, you do this and you do that. Well, here's an example of the difficulties. In the treating matter against the 15 members of government, the attorney for the government was paid an amount of money, a huge amount of money from the public purse, in what we believe was a responsibility of individual members of the Labour Party that were brought before the court, not the state's responsibility to pay. So the state's resources are used to pay for high price legal representation. In the case of the incitement matter against Edison James and myself, it is a team, it's a 3-member team from Trinidad that is prosecuting that matter. The DPP that knew enough law to nollie-pros the case of treating against 15 members of government, to set that aside, apparently did not have enough legal knowledge and experience to persecute the matter against Edison James and myself. She probably was ruled not competent enough to find the legal technicalities on which this should continue on indefinitely, even if they don't get to the stage where they have an actual conviction of the charge. So it is about hanging this over heads for as long as necessary. But the state is paying for it. In other words, the people's money is being used by those in government for their legal challenges and their legal battles against those who challenged them. In the meantime, one of the attorneys who stands for the opposition, one of the attorneys who takes cases for us and brings them before the court, Gilden Richards, he is owed $700,000 by the government. Remember, I just told you, the government's attorneys get paid even before the cases commence. They have their hundreds of thousands of dollars. Gilden Richards is owed $700,000 by the state of Dominica. The government of Dominica represented that it paid that amount sometime in 2018 without the approval of Parliament so to do, and came after the fact for the approval of the $700,000 that it had paid. The Parliament approved it after the fact of the payment, only to find out that Gilden Richards was never paid. $700,000 owed legitimately to him, claimed by the government that it was paid. Up to this day, it has not been paid, and the record of Parliament has not been corrected. You understand what is going on here? The government is doing its level best to ensure that whoever stands for the opposition, whoever takes case of the opposition, will be placed in as disadvantaged a position as is possible in the circumstances. They will be put out to pasture. They'll be starved of income that they have legitimately earned and to which they're entitled. While those who work for the politicians in government get carte blanche and any amount of money they require from the people's resources. It leaves us in a situation where we, the people of Dominica, and those of us in the parliamentary opposition, we have to fight with resources that we raise. We have no access to the public purse. So when the government, for example, is unlawfully, unconstitutionally holding funds belonging to the people of Dominica outside of Dominica, there is no public money from the treasury available to us to fight those cases. We must, as we're doing right now, through organizations like NICLIF, ask the people for their permission to use their money, because what the state is, what they're doing now with paying their lawyers, even for legal work that they individually are responsible for, their own political cases. They're using the public's money without the public's permission to do that. Effectively through initiated letters, we are coming to the public and saying, listen, openly, transparently, honestly, we need your support, your money, to fight these cases against a government that is oppressing us, that is effectively using your money to do what it wants. But we don't have the people's money to fight that from the public purse. We must get it directly through the people and these fundraising efforts. So it's critical that there is support for this and any other similar initiative that will help to fund these cases against the government, that will bring the government to right order.
And thank you very much for that, Lennox, and amen to that. Mr. James, one of the, just to put this in, but I'm giving you a chance to say whatever you need to say now at this time. But one of the last callers here said, you know, how is a man who's working overseas and that's how he earns his living, how is he going to be able to report twice weekly to a police station in Maho? I mean, isn't that a little bit much? And so I think this is why the caller is saying that it needs to be a challenge. And I think Dr. Andre laid it out very well. There needs to be a challenge of those bail conditions. Mr. James, over to you. I don't know if your mic is on, Mr. James, but I don't know if you're hearing us.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sheridan. Thank you. You can hear me now, yes.
Yes.
That's a very important question. That's a very important question. Because I think Mr. Linton earlier alluded to a situation in which Thompson Fontaine, and he probably, I don't know if he mentioned Danny, but Thompson Fontaine and Danny Luge embarked upon an initiative under which they were facilitating farmers to get their produce into the market in Martinique and other places, and at the same time engaging in some activity that would probably generate some income for them. The decision of the court under this bail arrangement now is that Thompson Fontaine must surrender his travel documents, and he must seek the permission of the court if he wants to travel, he leave the country. They well know that he is now engaged in work outside of Dominica. So what we've done, what we see here is that this gentleman, who is under the cudgel, if you like, of the Labour Party people, headed by Anthony Estefan, he now has to go to them, and his opportunity to earn a livelihood is under the control of these people. Because the court, while it's the court, but we've seen what happened with the court. When the highest court available to us, the CCJ, directed that the matter of the treating should be heard by the court, there was an intervention where the DPP, the court in Dominica, under the direction of somebody, decided to null prost the case. And Anthony and Stefan lied before the CCJ and told them that they had never approached the DPP. So Thompson's Fontaine's opportunity to earn a livelihood is now placed in the hands of the people who are determined to ensure that he disappears. So that's a serious matter, and that dictates that there must be a challenge to this. I believe the magistrate, I'm sure people will tell him that we're talking about this, the magistrate on his own on Friday should review that situation. Now, we talk about witnesses, and Sheridan, I heard you talk about witnesses and whether they died also. Sheridan, this matter has been handled by paper committee. What I understand is that the witnesses, their statements are in a document. They cannot add anything to it. So whether they're dead or not dead, they cannot add anything to it, except, of course, the defense might want to ask them to elaborate on whatever. But their statement is there, and as you heard Lennox say, and I repeat, there's not one of them who's indicated that any one of those people, Lennox, Linton, Thompson, Fontino, Edison, James, did anything to incite them. So the court in itself can just read those documents and say there's no case to answer. The court can do that right now. The magistrate, I understand today, said that this thing about sine die is illegal, unconstitutional. That's the gist of what I'm getting from people who know about these legal things. So the court of his own volition now can stop this nonsense. It is real nonsense. The officer, the police officer who was in charge of the policemen who were gathered at outside the financial center on the 7th of February, the gentleman who was in charge, a gentleman called Coffey, he indicated in his statement that Lennox, Linton told the crowd to go to their homes and Lennox, Linton left. They have tried to get him to change his statement and he has refused, and he has suffered and still suffering the consequence of that refusal now. So that's what we're dealing with, there's nothing there, nothing there. So it is just a question of them holding a thing over your head so that, like as I referred to in the Nicaragua situation, where 7 would-be candidates have been put in jail. So while they haven't put us in jail yet, put potential candidates in jail yet, they are looking in that direction. So, and we can't, and people like Thompson, Fontaine, Lennox, Linton, and we can't depend on the legal system, the justice system here to dispense justice to us. The police is spending a lot of time just looking for, if we blow our nose with our right hand, they will pick us up. If we look to the left, they'll pick us up. Yet you have $500,000 that disappeared that was involved in a racket at Teplat. And up to now, we do not know what's happening to it. There was a car outside that house when the people were custodied. We are hearing stories about who that car belongs to. And we wonder whether it is because of the ownership.
Whose name is it registered?
Pardon?
Issues about whose name the car is registered in.
Right, we're hearing stories. So you wonder what is happening, but we cannot, Thompson Fontaine, Lennox, Linton, Swags John, we cannot depend on the legal system to dispense justice in our direction. We cannot. And similarly, those people are supporters. So you're leaving those people with no avenue for justice, no avenue to defend themselves. You're persecuting them. It's not prosecution when it comes to the opposition, it's persecution. That is what is there. Some years ago, when people talk about whether what they're doing is looking to silence the opposition and remove opposition people. Some years ago, I remember there was a publication in one of the, I can't remember the paper it was, but it was written, it's an article that was written by a lady, I think her name was Helena Durand. And she had an interview with Mr. Skerritt, and she came back in that paper and she said he admires dictators. And I know Mr. Skerritt admires Ortega of Nicaragua. So are we seeing the approach and the actions of Ortega being reflected in what we're seeing here? Lennox told you that there's a gentleman called Khan from Trinidad who comes here every so often and picks up, I don't know, probably $1 million Trinidadian dollars, okay, and goes back. and we are being made the laughing stock here.
But by the way, we have asked in the parliament for the amount of money that has been paid to these Trinidad lawyers to prosecute cases against the parliamentary opposition. We asked that question in the parliament since February of 2020. We have been denied an answer to that question, which is a public interest question. They will not answer the question.
Right.
And we must not forget, for the purpose of these discussions, that Danny Luge was kidnapped by police officers. In any other civilized country, that kidnap of Danny Luge on that Saturday afternoon in his constituency in Mont Daniel, for simply being in a vehicle on the side of the road, interfering with nobody at all, that incident would have been the subject of a police investigation and prosecution. Danny Luge was kidnapped. No police officer is interested. They're only interested in policing the members of the parliamentary opposition and patriots in Dominica.
No, I heard Dr. Andre about the caution that should be given to Thompson Fontaine with respect to what he says and the extent to which he needs to be careful that he doesn't prejudice his case, and I agree with that. But what we're looking at here is a situation in which people like Tony Estefan and all those who are on the other side, if you like, not on your program, Sheridan, on the other side, can say what they want about Thompson Fontaine, denigrate him, misrepresent him with respect to these very charges, and the ban doesn't allow him to even defend himself. I expect if Thompson Fontaine is going to say anything about his case, he'll be mindful that he needs to be cautious and be careful. But I'm wondering and I'm uncomfortable about a situation where the court tells him you cannot speak about it, while the court leaves everybody else, including his political opponents, to be able to chastise him and to take him down. I'm concerned about that, and I believe if the court is going to put a ban like that on Thompson Fontaine, they should ban the entire media and say no media must report on this case at all. That is where that's the only place I would see justice happening. Okay.
Yeah,
so,
if I may interject very quickly, but Thompson's counsel, there is no such fetter on Thompson's lawyer or lawyers. I can tell you, Mr. James, and you're right, in many cases, lawyers use the media in a very strategic fashion to advance the interests of their client's case. So it could well be the case that his lawyer or lawyers could be doing the talking for him, and there's no prohibition, as far as I know, against them advancing the case through the media, because in many cases, it is good to sensitize the public about the nature of the case. And this may well be one of them, to be quite frank with you.
Except with Andre, that the magistrate has indicated that if there is evidence that the representation out there in the media, which is about the case, is coming on behalf of Dr. Fontaine, it could influence his bail condition.
I wasn't aware of that part of it.
Yeah. Right. So that clearly, if his lawyers are speaking, it would be assumed that they're speaking on his behalf, and therefore that would affect his bail condition. That was made clear in the court yesterday, which I found to be quite astonishing.
Well, all the more reason why they should seek a variation of this. They should try to vacate some of these onerous conditions of the recognizance.
That's the point I was making, and I'm hoping that the magistrate can be hearing what we're saying tonight, or somebody relate to him, and of his own volition, he will go there and realize that he has to waive that order, because that can cause part of the problem. Now, again, I'm saying, and I warn again about what can happen if these people continue to try and denigrate people, political opponents, and urge their people to do harm to our people. Because there can be no question about it that when you cite and you describe our people, describe us as cockroaches and kakado, and say, when you see a cockroach, what do you take to kill it? The shoe. It is a direct incitement to do something evil and can cause a problem in this country. I'm urging Mr. Skerritt, and there's a friend of mine who always talks to me and describes me as a voice of reason. I'm appealing to Mr. Skerritt and the voice of reason describer to let reason prevail. You have been associated with a position that, as Mr. Skerritt, that Estefan speaks for you 95% of the time. It is not good for the people to conclude that this is you speaking through Mr. Estefan. Because if Lennox Linton is a cockroach, and if Thompson Fontaine is a cockroach, and Edison James is a cockroach, Who are you, Sheridan? Who are you, ordinary Mr. Joe Blow? Who are you? You're a cockroach. And the direction that is coming from this man is to kill you, be free to kill you. And you cannot rely on the police. You cannot rely on the police for justice. You cannot rely on the court for justice. So I'm urging the leaders, and apart from these political leaders, I'm urging the business leaders, the religious leaders, and the sports leaders, and the community leaders to take heed of this. Mr. Skerritt will probably not listen to me and Lennox and you, but he will listen to you all. Call him. Even if you've left the jurisdiction, you're somewhere else, call Mr. Skerritt. There was a time when the bishop decided to bring people together under what he called the National Committee for Prevention of Crime and Violence or something of the sort. Be prepared to get involved again, because I am just warning. And the police, please understand your role and stop being biased. Stop being biased. It cannot be right for mercenaries to come here from where they've come and went to Mr. Linton's home. And the circumstance in which they went there and what we saw, there are many of us who believe that they were geared up to kill Mr. Linton or somebody else whom they would have met there. That is not good. People will decide I'm going to defend myself. I have to prepare to defend myself. So let us get away from that. And with respect to these matters in front of us, the authorities, I'm urging you, drop those bogus charges. Drop those bogus charges. And then the question of bail and conditions of bail and all that will become irrelevant. And let us move on in peace. And let us go to our elections whenever they come in peace. And there's a person who called early on, I recognize the voice, I think it's Mr. Lloyd, and asked what we're going to do. My friend, we are the doers. You ask what we're going to do. Take the opportunity to call Mr. Linton, to call me and suggest what should be done. Because it may be that we believe what we are doing is the proper thing, but you have other ideas as to what should be done, share them with us. Don't sit back over there and just shout all the time what you're doing. And the government can call us and suggest what you think we should do. Because this is a matter for all the people. Mr. Linton, Mr. Fontaine, I'm now way back in the background. Not even close to the thing. I'm way back in the background. These are the people in the forefront now. Call them, share your ideas with them, and let us come together, because there's a common cause that we have to fight. And that is to preserve our democracy and preserve the integrity of this country. Commonwealth of Dominica. Thank you.
Gentlemen, it's 10 minutes after 10, and you know, the time is just kind of rushing by when, you know, you're having some very good discussions. It's kind of time for us to start winding down, but I believe that we, and I'm going to take your closing remarks, closing comments in a minute, but really and truly, it seems to me the case has been made by the attorneys here tonight that this charges is weak. It should be challenged, and I certainly hope that the attorneys in Dominica, the committee of concerned lawyers, I certainly hope that they're listening, and we will certainly be in touch with them from Netcliffe to find out whether in fact they'd be willing to mount such a challenge. But it seems to me that it has to be mounted, because how much longer can these cases go? And then, of course, secondly, it is clear from all of the comments that we've had here tonight that the bail conditions are extremely burdensome on Dr. Thompson Fontaine, and it has to be challenged. I certainly hope that the magistrate himself who imposed that bail will review it, but I certainly hope that the lawyers will go in there on Friday and speak to them and make a case to really do something about it. It's really too burdensome. You know that this man is working overseas. You know that he has to make his living, and yet you're going to tell him that he must report twice a week in Dominica. That does not make sense. That sounds unreasonable. And then to say that you put somebody in a position where they can decide whether or not they're going to allow him to travel so that he can go to work, that too appears to me burdensome and punitive. Well, let me just take your closing remarks now, Mr. Linton. Your mic, if you want to turn it on.
The situation in Dominica is extremely grave, as evidenced this week by the trials and tribulations that Dr. Thompson Fontaine was forced to endure in the legal system that is emerging more and more like justification for the plunder of the resources of the Commonwealth of Dominica. And we are seeing, of course, advocacy from the champions of the moral code that are glorifying what the tyranny against opposition and dissent in Dominica that has emerged under this regime of the last 20 years. So the call is for there to be an end to all this, because this is not good for Dominica. If what the government of the day wants is good for Dominica, and then they say that is what they mean, then they will stop the things that they're doing against the opposition and the patriots, and these persistent attacks on the freedom and democracy of the people of Dominica, so that we can move on with building the best Dominica for all Dominicans. Now, I want to support the call for funding of all of these activities, these things, the incitement charges, bogus incitement charges, the case of the missing billions from the public purse, the brutalization of the Salisbury people, all of these other crimes against the humanity of the people of Dominica that have been committed under this administration need to go to court. Not only court here in Dominica, but the World Court, the International Court of Justice in The Hague. We need to make examples of this in the global community so that people understand where our rights as human beings are being trampled on. There are things that happen in defense of that. And there are still people in Dominica who feel that lives here matter. The lives of Dominican people matter as much as the lives of human beings all around the world matter and are being protected by the rule of law and constitutions around the world. We are shortchanging ourselves by suggesting to the world that we are less than others. And this constant attack on outstanding global citizens like Dr. Fontaine, because of what he wants for Dominica and what he would like to see happen in Dominica, is totally unacceptable. It is unacceptable because it makes us, it puts us up as objects of ridicule in the global community. How could you have somebody who has done so well, not for himself, but for other countries around the world, with his outstanding professionalism in the field of economic development and strategic planning? How can he be embraced in the way he has been embraced by this international consortium of governments that has put together a team to advise the government of South Sudan? And he's been there for a number of years now. How do you have your advocates, those who champion that moral code, underlined by the most vulgar and disgraceful language to come out of the mouth of a senior counsel, underlined by that sort of representation? How do you have that code? How do you feel comfortable institutionalizing that code to glorify the brutalization and the terrorizing of honest, decent Dominicans who have distinguished themselves in the global community? In South Sudan, Dr. Fontaine enjoys diplomatic immunity. He is free from prosecution for, he cannot be arrested or detained. He is driven around in presidential limousines to his various assignments. That's how important they think he is, and where he was born, where he grew up, growing bananas and selling to the boxing plant in Rosalie. In his country, he's treated like a common criminal. For what? Not for any crime he's committed, but for manufactured charges of incitement and manufactured charges that suggest he does not have a right to free speech, which is a constitutionally entrenched right, and one of the privileges enjoyed by freedom-loving people all around the world. He's guilty of nothing more than that. He's guilty of nothing less in Dominica, but that is how you treat him. At the same time, you have the Corrales of this world, you have the Monfareds of this world, who this government, the very same government that is persecuting Thompson Fontaine in Dominica, now imposing bail conditions that will make it difficult for his continued employment overseas if those bail conditions are not altered. You have the same government that is orchestrating all those actions, all those oppressive, tyrannical actions. The same one facilitating Monfared, Corallo, Madwiki, Rudolph King, Lapseng, with diplomatic passports, diplomatic immunity, with which some of them have been committing their crimes against humanity across international borders. How is this just? How is this right? How is it fair? Because what you're saying with those actions is that Dominicans' lives mean not a damn thing. And when you can have so many billions of dollars of the state's money under the control of your foreign friends who are deciding who in Dominica should work, you're participating in a system of modern day slavery at the very same time that you have people dressing in their African clothes and traditional outfits saying they stand for reparations for what happened to us in slavery hundreds and hundreds of years ago. But what is happening now to enslave the population to the will of foreigners, using the money of the people of Dominica, you have absolutely no interest in it. And therefore, you're not concerned with the struggles that generations yet unborn will have to struggle with for reparations for what is being done to their forefathers today in this land. It is a shame, it is a disgrace. We should not be proud of it. And that is why we should continue to stand and stand strong and stand firm. Stand in the courts of justice, stand in the courts of public opinion, stand until this ruthless, brutal, tyrannical administration is removed from the backs of the people of Dominica. We can stand for nothing more and nothing less. God bless you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Excellent. Thanks a lot for that, Lennox. Prime Minister James, you can turn on your mic and we can have your words, your closing remarks.
Yeah, I would just want to say it to the Prime Minister and those people in authority. What you're doing here does not show strength. It shows weakness. It shows that you're afraid. It shows that you do not have the confidence in yourself. So don't fool yourself by those who shout around you that you are strong. No, what you're doing here, the way you're behaving is showing weakness. And I'm directing it to you, the Prime Minister, because you are in charge of everything. You are in control of everything. The null processing of that case came from you. It was on your behalf that the letter was written to the Director of Public Prosecution asking her to null process the case. She's a subordinate of yours. So you control the court. That is how we see it. That's what you've demonstrated. So it is a weakness that you're showing by what you're doing in this case here. Thompson Fontaine is not a flight risk. Thompson Fontaine gave advance warning that he was coming here. He told the authorities he was coming here. He's not a flight risk. You know the character of the man. There's nothing about him that you know of. I can tell you that this man is a man who is a lawbreaker and who is likely to flee from justice. The case that on which this bail matter is attached is bogus. There's absolutely no basis for that. I heard you, Mr. Gregoire, saying that there are indications that this fact-finding committee which came down here in the question of this supposed coup, that they found that there was no such thing. There's no basis. You have no leg to stand on. The officer on the ground at that meeting on the 7th of February have told you all what the situation is. You are now persecuting him because he has refused to change his story in accordance with your direction. So you know what the situation is. We have no problem with prosecution, but there's a problem with persecution. And you're not involved. What is involved here is not prosecution of people for crime, it's persecution. Stop it. And those people, as I want to repeat, those people who have the ears of the Prime Minister, talk to him. The police, we are not your enemies. We are Dominicans. You are sworn to protect and serve us, all of us. How can it be that 20 people who are not regarded as opposition have found a way in your clutches, claiming that they were involved in incitement, and not one on the other side. Not one on the other side. What are we from? Are we from Mars? No, we are from the same community. We're all brothers and sisters. And we are human beings. We are not cockroaches. We are not dogs. We are not pigs. We are not garbage. Mr. Prime Minister, Tony Astafan speaks for you 90% of the time. In your silence, you're telling a large proportion of Dominicans that you regard them as pigs and cockroaches and cacador and garbage. That is what you're saying, Mr. Skerry. That is what you're saying. That's what your spokesman is saying, and you are not distancing yourself from it. So you are part of it. That is what you're saying. Members of the cabinet, that is what you're saying. Religious leaders, that's what you're part of. Business leaders, that's what you're part of. You need to redress that. You need to stop that. In the final analysis, what we want is peace in our country, where everyone's talent is brought to the fore and is available for the development of this country. That is not going to happen if those in power, use the power. And it's unfortunate that the police commissioner some time ago reminded us that the police has the authority and the power and perhaps the inclination to use deadly force. No, step back from that kind of thinking and recognize us as brothers and sisters ready to work together for our country. Thank you.
I hear you very loud and clear, Prime Minister Edison James. I mean, obviously you're saying it's time to eliminate all that divisiveness and all that degradation of people and behave as the one class of people are better or superior. So one class is human and one class is not human. I think I hear you clearly saying that you want to see peace and unity in the country so that everybody can work together for the betterment of the country and everyone in Dominica, not just for the betterment of a few. Attorney Gabriel Christian, over to you for your final words.
I want to thank you, Brother G, for your leadership. I want to thank you, Brother Irving and Brother Lambie, for your steadfast efforts at master control. Mr. Prime Minister, Brother Edison, Brother Lennox, leader of our opposition in Dominica, Brother Irving, the judge, a good judge. Tony Astafan is the pyromaniac of the moment. He strides through the halls of power of dry tinder, combustible material, with a Molotov cocktail in the most disgusting way, as the Prime Minister has mentioned, denigrating Dominicans, persecuting them. So I want to make a call tonight. We have a head of state. His name is Charles Sovereign. There used to be a time that he considered himself a paragon of virtue in trade unionism. Charles Sovereign, President of Dominica, I call on you tonight to condemn Tony Astafan for his racist attacks on Black and Kalinago people, calling them garbage and cockroaches. I call on the Bishop of Roseau, if one has been appointed, if not, the Church Council, to condemn Tony Astafan and his government, which by its silence is in complicity with his statements, calling Dominicans garbage, pigs, and cockroaches. To the trade union leaders, I call on you this evening to set an example for how we talk to each other and how we treat each other by condemning thoroughly and comprehensively Tony Astafan, the spokesman of the government of Dominica, for calling Dominicans in their own homes cockroaches, garbage, and pigs. To the business leaders, those who try to use media to advertise their wares. Well, what kind of country will you have when the pyromaniac of the moment, with his vulgarity and his racial animosity, destroys the bonds of civility that the Prime Minister James spoke so eloquently about? We cannot build a country where there's racial discord perpetrated by a foul-mouthed propaganda minister who savages decent Dominicans like Thompson Fontaine and others for speaking out for justice. And so, to the business leaders, we ask you to thoroughly and comprehensively condemn Tony Astafan. I don't believe his father, Wadi, was known to be using that kind of language when he was alive. Shame on you, Mr. Astafan. To the boys and girls who have been abused and used by that language, disassociate yourselves from him. To the folks on Kyrie who grin and smile and say, SC boy, you're doing a good job, boy. Think again. Who are you? Where do you come from? What is your origin? What is your sense of respect and self-respect? What is your understanding of your history? When you sit there in a red shirt and a red hat and allow this gentleman, or I'm sorry, allow this man, he's not a gentleman, someone who has lost his moorings, someone who's lost his professional etiquette. He has none. It's a rebuke to good sense and wise counsel to call him senior counsel. So to you folks at Kyrie, make a statement that you do not believe in racial prejudice, that you disassociate yourself from the racial animosity being festered by Tony Astafan, in which the Prime Minister of Dominica is complicit. Let me say something about Lennox Linton, who did a marvelous job in telling us who our brother is. Not that we did not know, but in elucidating his qualifications. When Roosevelt, Medat, Skerritt went to Africa to get a diplomat, he got the worst kind, Alison Maduke, a woman who plundered the country of billions. Thompson Fontaine, on the other hand, when he goes to Africa, represents the best of our humanity in his service to peace and prosperity. Look at the dichotomy. Look at the contrast. Look at, what the old student companion taught us about birds of a feather flocking together. So we have Maduke, Tony Astafan, and Skerritt on one side of the scale, and you have Thompson Fontaine and the Patriots on the other. And when the scales of justice have been weighed, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, they have been found wanting. They have been found wanting. And so tonight, all of us here can take a degree of pride that when the time came to call for the freedom of our brother, we stood to our duties. I want to congratulate all of you and all the Dominicans at home and abroad who were majestic in the defiance against the tyranny. And I want to ask you to tomorrow support in spirit and in action those who will be walking for freedom, because time soon come. In the twinkling of an eye, in but a moment, we shall all be changed. But we have to keep our heads high, our hearts strong, and our resolve to be like cold steel, the steel that will bring us all liberty. God bless you all. God bless Thompson Fontaine. God bless the Patriots. I thank you.
And thank you, Attorney Gabriel Christian. Dr. Andre, here is a man, his name is Dr. Thompson Fontaine. This man travels for how many days? He's jet lagged and he's fatigued. He comes and he gets arrested. He goes to a jail. He sleeps on a cold floor with rats and, all kinds of things. And then he's let out on Monday. And then on Monday, he says, see you at the walk on Wednesday. Here's a tired man who had Kool-Aid and bread for a couple of days. And the man is saying, listen, the people are walking for peace and justice and prosperity. I'm going to walk with them on Wednesday. And I expect that Thompson Fontaine will be in the walk tomorrow morning. This is the kind of stuff this man is made of, Dr. Andre.
Thank you, Mr. G. And let me indicate that the eloquence of my fellow panelists has left me speechless, grasping and groping for something meaningful to say. And quite frankly, although I'll try my best, I think I will still fall short. But Dr. Thompson Fontaine epitomizes the overarching principle that the price of democracy is eternal vigilance. Eternal vigilance because it has to be fought for on a daily basis. It has to be fought for because there are those who unfortunately will seek to undermine it while dressed in the army fatigues of self-interest and iniquity. It has to be fought for afresh because there are those who will seek to victimize and brutalize and persecute and tribalize the people who are under their heels, at least who they think. But again, we have to take comfort. We have to take a kind of, or bring a kind of optimism to the table, because always in the darkest hour, there's a flicker, there's a flame. Even where the soil is rocky, even where it appears to be unfertile soil, there are those who give us hope that something afresh, that something is changing. And I see elements of that change, but it's change that we have to keep on feeding or fanning the flames of that change. You see change when you see an 82-year-old woman speak openly in front of the Prevost Cinema Hall, saying that she is walking for her country. We see change where you have a 76-year-old man of slim build, and I mean no disrespect when I say that, quite frankly, he probably cannot even lift a 15-pound bag of marshmallow, standing up with a strength and courage which inspires all of us. We see change when young people are joining the fight or joining the walk because something has been lifted within themselves, something worthy, something precious, something desirable. We see change when persons are raising their voices, knowing full well that the guillotine of oppression or repression may come stumbling on them. We see change when we have this type of program where persons, very knowledgeable persons, such as the former Prime Minister, Mr. James, the leader of the opposition, Gabriel Christian, Mr. Gregoire, who's been on the forefront for donkey years, can host a program that hopefully can enlighten persons about the essence of democracy and the hope and the hope and the belief that Dominica is worth saving and Dominica is worth fighting for. So we have to continue. We have to continue fanning that flame. We have to continue feeding wood to that fire of righteousness, that fire of people saying that, look, we have to protect what we have. We cannot allow it to be thrown down the drain, even if they mock us, even if they call us derogatory names. We have to prove that we are better than them. And we will know that eventually good will prevail over evil. Because again, as I said, although it requires effort, but if everyone contributes their fair share, if everyone contributes their little whatever they can, if everyone peels the little potatoes to put into that pot of righteousness, then eventually we will see the light. And we have to thank Dominica or the place of Grand Fond that a man like Dr. Thompson Fontaine, who has achieved so much out there, is still so much interested in maintaining his ties and the welfare of his country that he would risk it all to come back. And he is someone who has 3 siblings in the Dominica police force, and yet they could still treat him as a common criminal. So we can only go but up, but we cannot go but up without putting the effort to climb up, because we know, as the good book says, the help will only come to us if we help themselves. So this is what I am imploring Dominicans. Help yourselves to lift up from yourselves this yoke of iniquity that unfortunately is threatening the existence of every patriotic Dominican, whether at home or abroad. So I thank you for the opportunity to speak words of nonsense, Mr. G, but to thank your listeners for staying up so late. And hopefully many of them will at least be enlightened. Many of them will think think deeply, and many of them will realize that it is our struggle. It is not the struggle of the UWP or NJAM or Q95 or N-Butter or whatever. It is the struggles of Dominicans. And we have to take that struggle, because countries or people in every country you can think of, whether in the West Indies, whether in Europe, Asia, they are setting the example of what it means to be a patriot, what it means to care for your country, what it means to care for your livelihood, what it means to care for your family, and what it means to care for our future. And that is what we have to care for. All of these things and then some. So once again, Mr. G, thank you very much, and good night to your great followers and listeners.
And thank you so much, Dr. Andre. But here's two things as we say goodnight that I want to leave with us and with our audience. One, Dominicans should be prepared to walk for peace and to walk for justice and to walk for prosperity. Just take a walk. Tomorrow there's a walk. Go walk. Secondly, I want to implore all our Dominican people at home and abroad, and friends of Dominica home and abroad, corporations, does not be individuals, it could be businesses. Just go to the NIDCLIF website, nidclf.org. Make a donation, make a contribution, so that it enables NIDCLIF to be able to support the causes that they're so passionate about tonight. We heard from the callers. The callers want us to challenge this case that's in court because they think these charges are frivolous. It's a bogus thing. It's not going anywhere. It has not gone anywhere for 5 years. And they also want to challenge these bail conditions, which obviously are intended to prevent Thompson Fountain from making a living. So if you're really concerned about those issues, show your solidarity, take a walk, and also go to the NIDCLIF website, www.nidclf.org, make a contribution as much as you can make. It doesn't matter how much. Every little amount matters. It will help. Please, and ask a friend, tell a friend, tell somebody else to go there, make a contribution. So as I say goodnight, I really want to thank Dr. Andre, thank Lennox Linton, thank the opposition leader, and thank Prime Minister Edison James and our distinguished attorney Gabriel Christian and Lambie and Sherwin and all of those folks who stayed up with us all night here. Many of you on Facebook, and we really recognize you and salute you and appreciate you. We didn't get a chance to read any of your comments, but we certainly recognize your presence and appreciate you. And we hope that many of you will, if you can, take a walk. And many of you, if you can, just go to the NIDCLIF website, make a contribution. So good night, gentlemen. And it was a very nice discussion. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thoroughly edifying. Mr. James, thank you, and sorry for keeping you up so late. Lennox,
well, that's Linton, all right.
It's okay.
All the best.
All right.
Good night, Lennox.
Lennox, Mr. James, Gabriel, Lambie, Mr. G.
God bless you all.
Okay. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Mr. James, I started working on that thing, on the Johnny Cakes.
Yes. No problem.
Okay.
I thought it was crap, you know.
I haven't reached that level of skill as yet.
Okay.
Give me 10 more years.
Okay. He said he can't make crab hacks yet. It's only Johnny Cake he can make.
Johnny Cake.
Yeah.
You're still on course for me?
Yes.
You're still on course for me? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, good night, everybody.
Good night.
All the best.
Good night.
Okay. All right, Lennox.